Dreamland Encounters invites you into a world where dreams might be more than just imagination. Strange stories of UFOs and otherworldly encounters await, challenging what you thought you knew. On a cold December night in 1980, something extraordinary happened in the Rendlesham Forest near Raff Bentwaters, a US-leased British base during the Cold War. What unfolded over 3 days would become one of the most thoroughly documented UFO events in history. It started when Airman First Class John Burroughs and Sergeant Bud Stephen spotted unusual lights descending into the woods beyond the base perimeter. Suspecting a potential aircraft crash, they alerted control and were authorized to investigate, joined by Airman Jim Penniston. What they discovered defied all explanation. A triangular craft approximately 9 feet wide and 6 feet high hovered silently just above the forest floor. Penniston got close enough to touch it, later claiming he saw strange hieroglyphic-like symbols etched into its hull. In an instant, the craft lifted vertically through the trees and vanished. The Raff Bentwaters audio tape captures the tension of that night. At 2 a.m., U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Chiles Whitted and his security team recorded live their encounter with something technologically superior and utterly inexplicable. Static cuts through the recording, hushed voices describe a strange red light and a beam descending to the ground. This wasn't a second-hand account from a farmer or civilian. This was the deputy base commander of a joint NATO air base housing nuclear weapons, describing an encounter with the unknown. The next day, Penniston began experiencing vivid dreams that included mysterious binary code sequences. Are these just dreams, or something more? The evidence challenges official accounts and continues to baffle personnel even after 4 decades. What do you think happened in those woods that night? Non-exchange lights in the woods caught the attention of military personnel over 2 consecutive nights, leading to an extraordinary series of events. Colonel Charles Halt, initially skeptical, assembled a team of security police equipped with a handheld radiation meter, starlight scope, and a cassette tape recorder to investigate. Their expedition yielded remarkable documentation. For 18 minutes, the Halt tape captured something extraordinary. A pulsing red glowing object moving silently through the trees, weaving between branches before shooting skyward and emitting beams of light. At one point, a beam landed directly at their feet, prompting Halt's exclamation, "This is unreal." Multiple lights appeared in the sky, maneuvering at impossible angles. Halt and his team pursued them through the forest, their voices calm but urgent, clearly disturbed by what they were witnessing. The audio recording would become one of the most compelling pieces of UFO evidence ever released. Raw, unfiltered documentation from trained military professionals. Official government responses were initially dismissive. The British Ministry of Defence maintained for decades that the incident posed no threat to national security. However, Freedom of Information requests later revealed quiet tracking of the case through internal memos referencing unidentified aerial phenomena over Raff Bentwaters and Raff Woodbridge. US authorities proved even more secretive. Halt's incident report, the Halt memo, was classified and hidden for years until leaked to the public. It described a possible unidentified craft sighting, complete with ground impressions, elevated radiation levels, and visual confirmations from multiple USAF personnel. To this day, neither government has provided an explanation. The witnesses, Penniston and Burroughs, never retracted their testimonies, though their individual accounts diverged over time. Penniston claimed telepathic communication with the craft, while Burroughs would later suffer medical complications and pursue legal action. The incident remains an enduring mystery, documented yet unexplained, continuing to spark debate among researchers and enthusiasts decades after it occurred. Lon Burroughs' legal battle with the VA took an unexpected turn when previously classified information came to light. Raff Bentwaters had tactical nuclear weapons at the time, a fact both governments had initially denied. The court ruling was groundbreaking, granting Burroughs full medical disability coverage for injuries sustained during the Rendlesham event. The ruling's significance lies in its acknowledgement that Burroughs was exposed to an unidentified phenomenon during his service. This admission represents a rare, indirect confirmation that something extraordinary occurred in those woods. In 2010, Colonel Halt broke his long silence. At a Washington, D.C. conference, he emphatically stated, "This was many others saw it, it was real." He revealed that radar operators from Raff Whitted had tracked a fast-moving object during the event, but were instructed to remain silent. The incident gained renewed traction in the 2000s and 2010s, attracting interest from UFO researchers and journalists. The British Ministry of Defence released documents, many heavily redacted, repeatedly asserting no threat was found. Yet, evidence continued to mount. Multiple pieces of evidence support the encounter's authenticity. The Halt tape was analyzed and confirmed consistent with 1980s cassette recordings, with ambient forest sounds matching the Rendlesham environment. Ground impressions photographed at the scene revealed a distinct tripod pattern. Radiation levels taken by Halt's team showed anomalies above normal background readings. Multiple airmen submitted sworn affidavits about their experiences. Most compelling is the ongoing silence from authorities. Neither the US nor UK governments have offered a plausible explanation. No aircraft was reported missing. No experimental flight tests were scheduled. The weather was clear. The radar blips, audio recordings, and witness testimonies remain uncontested. Unlike Roswell, no materials were recovered. Unlike Phoenix, there was no mass civilian sighting. What makes the Rendlesham incident and the Halt tape so powerful is its immediacy, a raw, real-time documentation of an inexplicable event. Colonel Halt has since reflected, "I wish this had never happened, but it did, and the evidence is here." Perhaps it's fitting that this encounter, one of the clearest and most official UFO incidents in modern history, was captured not in secrecy, but in sound recorded on a simple tape deck by a skeptical officer seeking the truth. An extraordinary encounter unfolded in the skies above Alabama. Captain Clarence S. Chiles, a seasoned World War II veteran now flying commercial routes, was piloting Eastern Airlines Flight 576 from Houston to Atlanta. At 2:45 a.m., the DC-3 cruised smoothly at 5,000 feet. First Officer John B. at 505 ALA. Whitted sat in the co-pilot seat, scanning the dark expanse. Behind them, 20 passengers slumbered quietly under soft cabin lights, the twin engines humming steadily. Suddenly, Chiles spotted something unusual. A distant point of light on the eastern horizon grew rapidly, far brighter than any star. Within moments, the light intensified and took shape. "John, do you see that?" Chiles asked. Whitted turned and saw it too. A massive object was racing toward them, fast, bright, and completely silent. The two men watched, frozen. Approached, details became clear. The craft was cylindrical, rocket-like, with no visible wings or tail. Later estimates placed its length at over 100 feet. 2 rows of square windows emitted a soft bluish-white glow. Brilliant orange and red flames shot from its rear, suggesting a controlled propulsion system. In an instant, the object banked sharply to the right and stretched out. The sudden motion created turbulence that rocked the DC-3 before it vanished into the night. The entire encounter lasted barely 10 seconds. Shaken, Chiles radioed the nearest control tower. No scheduled military exercises were in the area. No commercial flight paths intersected. No aircraft, civilian or military, were expected at that altitude and trajectory. Upon landing in Atlanta at dawn, both Chiles and Whitted filed detailed reports with U.S. Air Force intelligence. Their descriptions matched precisely. They even drew nearly identical sketches. A cigar-shaped object with glowing windows, trailing fire, devoid of wings or markings. The craft had passed within 1,000 feet of their cockpit, dangerously close. Within days, the case reached Project Sign, the Air Force's first official investigation into unidentified flying objects. The encounter with unidentified flying objects wasn't just another case of civilians misinterpreting a weather balloon. These were experienced pilots, trained military officers with thousands of flying hours who carried significant professional credibility. Their account gained additional weight through corroboration from Clarence McKelvey, an American education press editor, seated near the front of the aircraft. While he didn't witness the entire event, McKelvey confirmed a brilliant flash outside the window and verified the aircraft's violent jolt that awakened several passengers. Project Sign quickly elevated the incident to an unidentified status. For a time, Chile's sighting became a focal point of intense internal debate about whether these encounters might represent evidence of advanced, potentially non-terrestrial craft. Dr. J. Allen Hynek, an Ohio State University astronomer and Project S consultant, provided a notable perspective. Initially skeptical, he observed that the pilot's descriptions didn't align with known aircraft, meteors, or celestial phenomena. The uniform window rows, horizontal movement, and consistent pilot-level altitude effectively ruled out most conventional explanations. As public UFO interest grew during the summer of 1948, driven by incidents like the Kenneth Arnold sighting and previous year's Roswell crash, the military's stance began shifting. Project SC's initial hypothesis suggesting extraterrestrial visitation was decisively rejected by Air Force Chief of Staff General Hoy Vandenberg, who found the conclusion lacking substantial evidence. The official narrative subsequently transformed. The Air Force proposed the pilots had witnessed a fireball-type meteor. However, neither pilot accepted this explanation. The pilots insisted the object was real, solid, and under intelligent control, characteristics fundamentally incompatible with meteor behavior. Both emphasized the object's flight characteristics, turning, leveling, maintaining altitude in ways suggesting deliberate navigation. The intense light didn't match typical meteor trails, and the horizontal movement defied standard astronomical explanations. Their consistent testimonies highlighted something extraordinary, an aerial phenomenon that challenged existing scientific understanding. Pilots Dale Chiles and Bill Whitted experienced an extraordinary event that defied explanation, an encounter that would mark them for life. Their sighting over Alabama in 1948 involved an unidentified craft with characteristics unlike anything known at the time. The object displayed a greenish hue and disintegrated rapidly, featuring rectangular lighted windows and an apparent fuselage structure with propulsion flames. These details reinforce the argument that this was a vehicle beyond conventional understanding. Though the story quietly faded from public attention, researchers continued investigating. New declassified files and pilot testimonies kept the case alive. A significant development occurred in 1969 with Project Blue Book's final report, the Air Force's third and last official UFO investigation. While many unexplained cases were reclassified as misidentified phenomena or hoaxes, the Chiles Whitted incident remained unresolved. The Air Force's meteor theory persisted, but they acknowledged insufficient data for definitive conclusions. Aviation historians and UFO researchers have since maintained the case's credibility. What made it remarkable wasn't just the witnesses' reliability, but the craft's extraordinary capabilities. It had no wings, no tail, no sound. It flew at tremendous speed, performed horizontal maneuvers, glowed, appeared intelligently operated, and vanished without a trace. Both Chiles and Whitted continued their commercial aviation careers, never altering their accounts. When asked years later, Whitted simply stated, "It happened. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't from around here." Modern experts continue exploring the case using meteorological databases, aircraft movement logs, and comparative pilot data. No plausible meteor or man-made aircraft matches the sighting's description. Critical questions remain. Why wasn't it detected on radar? Why did it not appear on any flight log or military schedule? Why would two experienced pilots fabricate such a bizarre story with no apparent motive? The Chiles Whitted case remains one of the early UFO encounters that blends credible testimony, corroborating evidence, and unexplained mystery. It played a crucial role in triggering the military's initial serious interest in unidentified aerial phenomena. UFOs have long been a quiet foundation beneath the towering structure of modern sightings, contributing to the formation of formal investigative bodies. The Kinross incident on November 23, 1953, over Lake Superior, Michigan, USA, stands as a prime example. Just a brief moment in the sky when something brilliant, massive, and unexplainable appeared and vanished as quickly as it came. Two men remained steadfast in their account. "We saw it." That night, Lake Superior lay calm but bitterly cold. Stars hung like ancient lanterns in a clear sky, while winds whispered over frozen waters. At 6:22 p.m., radar operators at the U.S. Air Force's 753 Aircraft Control and Warning Squadron in Truax Field, Madison, Wisconsin, detected an unusual blip, silent and unidentified. It was heading south over the Canadian border near Sioux Locks, with no transponder, radio contact, or flight plan. Within minutes, Air Defense Command responded by scrambling a jet from Kinross Air Force Base. This was standard protocol for a region sitting along a sensitive Cold War corridor, where any unauthorized aircraft triggered immediate suspicion. The interceptor was a Lockheed F-89 Sea Scorpion, a two-seater all-weather jet fighter equipped with radar and weaponry. First Lieutenant Felix Moncler, 27 years old, and an experienced pilot with numerous interceptions to his name, took the controls. Second Lieutenant Robert L. Wilson served as radar operator. At 6:25 p.m., the Scorpion lifted into the evening sky. As Moncla's aircraft climbed toward 30,000 feet, ground radar operators tracked both the F-89 and the unknown object. The mysterious bogey moved steadily across the lake at 500 miles per hour, with the Scorpion giving chase at full throttle. Then, something unprecedented occurred. At 6:52 p.m., the two radar targets converged. On the radar screen, two blips became one. Controllers anticipated Moncla would peel away or return to base, but no second signal reappeared. The merged blip continued momentarily before vanishing completely. Radio calls to the Scorpion went unanswered. Operators at Kinross waited in growing dread. A comprehensive search and rescue effort was immediately launched, involving both American and Canadian forces. Aircraft and surface vessels scoured the area for days, finding absolutely nothing, no wreckage, debris, oil slick, or trace of the aircraft or the unidentified object. Not an unexplained disappearance of two Air Force pilots, Monlaw and Wilson, sparked intense speculation and conspiracy theories. Their routine mission over Lake Superior turned into a mystery that would haunt military and UFO researchers for decades. The official Air Force explanation seemed thin from the start. They claimed the F-89 had crashed while pursuing a Royal Canadian Air Force C-47 cargo aircraft. Yet this story quickly unraveled. The RCF denied any aircraft in the area, and no Canadian plane matched the reported flight path. Why would an experienced pilot like Monlaw fail to identify a standard aircraft on radar or visually? Radar operators told a different story. Multiple independent witnesses observed something extraordinary. Two radar blips literally merging. This wasn't a crash or a simple disappearance, but a convergence that defied explanation. No aircraft debris was ever found, no parts, no signals, no floating fuel tanks. Aircraft don't simply vanish, even in deep waters. Rumors spread quickly among airmen. Some whispered about UFOs, while others suggested technical failures like radar malfunctions or spatial disorientation. But no theory fully explained the complete disappearance of both pilots and their aircraft. Years later, UFO researchers seized on what became known as the Kinross incident. Groups like the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena used it as potential evidence of military encounters with unidentified flying objects. Strange documents obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests added fuel to the speculation. Internal memos from Air Defense Command reference the incident cryptically. One document called the unknown object a bogey and confirmed the unusual radar visual convergence. In 1960, researcher Donald Kitto, a former Marine pilot with Pentagon connections, publicly argued that the Air Force was covering up extraterrestrial encounters. The Air Force eventually expanded its explanation, claiming the F-89 went down in Lake Superior due to the lake's extreme depth and poor visibility. While Lake Superior is indeed notorious for swallowing vessels, the original radar operators remained unconvinced by this narrative. The Kinross incident remains one of the most intriguing unsolved mysteries in military aviation history, a case that continues to challenge our understanding of what might happen in the skies. On a cold November night over Lake Superior, a trained pilot and radar operator launched a routine intercept mission. Locking onto an unknown target, their radar signatures merged and they vanished without a trace. What makes this incident most unsettling is not just the loss of the aircraft, but the unacknowledged suggestion that something in the sky possessed the power to make another object disappear. A craft without a flight plan, without transponder, without recovery. One anonymous crew member, speaking decades later, described the moment of convergence. I watched the two targets converge. There was no separation. It was like one just absorbed the other. In 2006, the Great Lakes Dive Company claimed to have located the F-89 wreck on sonar in Lake Superior. They posted images and coordinates online, promising a recovery effort, but within weeks the group vanished. Their website shut down. Calls went unanswered. Some suspected a hoax, while others wondered if they had discovered something they weren't supposed to. To this day, the wreckage remains undiscovered. The families of both airmen were left without closure. No remains were recovered, no mayday was sent, and the flight logs and relevant radar data stayed classified or missing. Theories abound. Some believe Montlaw got too close to a secret US or Canadian project and paid the price. Others maintain the simplest explanation, an accident followed by a failed recovery. Yet the details defy such comfortable narratives. The radar convergence, the lack of wreckage, the Canadian denial, the governmental silence, all point to something more complex. In an era when pilots were encouraged to intercept unknowns aggressively, Mantlaw may have encountered the wrong object at the wrong time, and perhaps that object was not from here. The Exit UFO Case, September 3rd, 1965. 1965. Pulled over on the roadside. When Officer Bertrand approached, she seemed shaken but composed. Something extraordinary had just happened. She explained that a large, silent object had descended from the sky, hovering just above her vehicle with blinking red lights, arranged in a circular motion. Her dog had become wildly agitated, and she was too frightened to move. Less than an hour later, another report came in from Norman Muscarello, an 18-year-old hitchhiking home. Near Kensington, along Route 150, he witnessed something that initially looked like a house on fire. A brilliant red light pulsated in the darkness, flaring and dimming in an unusual pattern. Suddenly, a massive silent object rose from behind the trees, hovering over the field. Muscarello described 5 powerful red lights pulsing in sequence, positioned on a low-hanging, metallic, and structured underside. Terrified, he dropped to the ground. When he looked up, the object remained motionless, watching. Then it drifted silently across the road. Panicked, Muscarello ran to the nearest farmhouse and called the police. At the station, Officer Bertrand was struck by the teenager's state of shock. The story mirrored the earlier report, and Muscarello's precise details about the lights, hovering and unnatural silence suggested this was no prank. Bertrand decided to investigate personally. He placed Muscarello in the cruiser and returned to the scene, where Officer David Hunt joined them. What followed would become a pivotal moment. Bertrand had initially scanned the sky and found nothing, but something didn't feel right. The woman's account had been too coherent, too controlled to dismiss. As they walked into the field, the night held its breath, waiting. The night sky erupted with an impossible sight. As flashlights cut through the darkness, 3 men stood transfixed. A large object rose above the treetops, exactly matching Muscarello's description. 5 bright red lights flashing in a circular, rotating sequence. Eerie shadows stretched across the field, trees bathed in an unnatural glow. Then the craft began to move. It drifted toward them silently, hovering overhead before continuing on and vanishing behind the tree line. Muscarello shouted. Bertrand and Hunt remained speechless. This was no joke. They had all witnessed something extraordinary. Back at the station, Bertrand meticulously documented the encounter. His report was clinical and precise. He described a large, silent object with 5 red lights that moved without any visible propulsion. It didn't resemble any aircraft he knew. No sound, no conventional explanation. Word spread rapidly. Within hours, Pete's Air Force Base dispatched investigators to interview the witnesses. Their initial report claimed the sighting was a formation of B-47 bombers, but Bertrand, Hunt, and Muscarello vehemently disagreed. Bertrand, a seasoned veteran, emphasized the impossibility: no sound, no vibration, and certainly no planes that hover silently while flashing rotating red lights. The Air Force shifted explanations, suggesting temperature inversion, causing misidentified celestial objects. This only intensified the witnesses' frustration. What they saw was a definite craft, solid, structured, with deliberate movement. Civilian UFO researchers, including NECAP, launched their own investigation. They uncovered additional witnesses reporting similar phenomena. Local residents described glowing skylights, objects hovering near power lines, and silent discs moving in ways no known aircraft could. Some even reported more dramatic encounters, lights peering into windows, animals displaying extreme panic. The incident transformed from a singular event into a complex, unexplained mystery that challenged conventional understanding of aerial phenomena. The Exeter incident stood apart from other UFO cases due to the exceptional credibility of its witnesses. 3 individuals, 2 trained police officers, and a civilian teenager provided independent, consistent accounts without exaggeration or attention-seeking motives. By 1966, the case had gained significant attention, becoming a focal point in congressional UFO hearings. Civilian pressure mounted for the government to take such sightings more seriously. The Condon Committee, a scientific panel assigned by the U.S. Air Force, briefly mentioned the incident in its final report, though without reaching a definitive conclusion. Years later, Bertrand and Hunt remained steadfast. Neither man ever altered his testimony or offered alternative explanations. "I'll never forget what I saw, and I know what I saw was real," Bertrand once stated. The original field still exists, just off Route 150, surrounded by woods. Local residents are familiar with the story, with some claiming ongoing unusual experiences, unexpected lights and sounds in the area. To this day, the Exeter incident remains one of the most compelling UFO encounters in American history. Its significance lies not in sensational claims, but in its simplicity and the integrity of those involved. 3 men witnessed something inexplicable. They were courageous enough to report it, and despite attempts to dismiss or rewrite their account, their story has never changed. They never claimed to understand exactly what they saw, only that something extraordinary had occurred. The night siege of Ilkley on December 1st, 1987 presents another intriguing account. That morning was bitterly cold, with fog clinging low to the moors and frost etching every blade of grass. Silence blanketed the Yorkshire hills when Philip Spencer, a former police officer turned security guard, set out just after 7 a.m. Spencer had recently moved to Yorkshire with his family. Known for his seriousness and rational thinking, he was not someone typically associated with extraordinary tales. Those who knew him described a reliable man with a solid reputation. He had taken the morning off to visit his father-in-law, bringing a camera to capture the haunting winter scenery of Ilkley Moor. What he claimed to have captured, however, was something entirely unexpected and unexplainable. Visibility was poor, with just a few hundred feet of sight ahead. His planned route seemed straightforward: cut across the moor and catch a train to his father-in-law's house. But everything changed within half an hour. Cresting a small ridge, Spencer spotted something unusual on the path. A figure about 4 feet tall, with an elongated body and large head. Initially thinking it might be a child, he realized something was different when it turned toward him. The creature's skin was a pale greenish-gray, with large black eyes, a small mouth, and no visible nose. Acting quickly, Spencer raised his camera and snapped a photo. The figure darted up a hillside and vanished over the ridge. Stunned, he sprinted after it, reaching the top seconds later, but the creature was gone. What he saw next stopped him in his tracks. In the valley below, a large metallic craft hovered silently, emitting a faint blue glow. According to Spencer, it slowly lifted, tilted to one side, and disappeared into the fog. Without a sound or wind disturbance, disoriented, he checked his compass. The needle spun wildly, unable to find north. His watch had stopped, though felt like mere minutes had passed. Something was clearly wrong. Later, Spencer discovered he'd arrived at his destination nearly 2 hours later than planned, with no explanation for the missing time. In the following days, he developed the film and found a grainy, out-of-focus photograph that nonetheless captured a humanoid figure standing mid-stride on a gravel path. Skeptics suggested it might be a person in a suit or a hoax. However, multiple photographic analysis labs, including Kodak, examined the image. While experts couldn't identify the figure, they confirmed the photograph was genuine, with clean negatives showing no signs of manipulation. The British UFO Research Association, BUFORA, took a keen interest in Spencer's extraordinary account, launching their own investigation into this mysterious encounter. Spencer underwent hypnotic regression, hoping to uncover more details about the mysterious time he had lost. His recollections were deeply unsettling. While under hypnosis, he described a sequence of extraordinary events. After taking a photograph and cresting a hill, he was enveloped by an intense bright light and lifted into the air. Completely paralyzed, he found himself transported to a sterile metallic room. Strange beings conducted a thorough examination, drawing his blood, inspecting his eyes, testing his limbs. Throughout this encounter, he witnessed projected images on the walls, scenes of war, environmental devastation, and then peaceful landscapes. Telepathically, he was told he would forget until the right moment. Afterward, he was returned to the moor, disoriented and confused, as if emerging from a dream. Many skeptics dismissed the hypnosis results as mere suggestion or imagination, yet others found striking similarities with accounts from alleged abductees around the world. Spencer never sought publicity or financial gain from his experience. He avoided media attention and requested anonymity for years, with his identity only becoming public much later. The photograph he captured remains one of the UK's most controversial pieces of UFO evidence. Experts have scrutinized, enhanced, and debated the image for decades. Some argue it's nothing more than a light trick, a misinterpreted bush, or someone in a costume. However, no one has definitively debunked the photograph. Ilkley Moor itself has a rich history of strange occurrences. Local residents have long spoken of unexplained lights, missing livestock, and mysterious nighttime sounds. In the weeks preceding Spencer's encounter, several community members reported unusual aerial phenomena, including a witness who described a glowing sphere hovering silently above her house. These incidents remained local gossip until Spencer's story emerged. What intrigues researchers isn't just the photograph or the hypnotic regression. It's Spencer's character. A law enforcement professional with no prior interest in UFOs, he was inherently skeptical. Those who interviewed him noted his consistent narrative, his obvious discomfort with attention, and his reluctance to embellish. His account never wavered. Years later, Spencer distanced himself from the event, feeling it had unexpectedly defined his life. In a rare conversation with a journalist, he simply stated, "I saw something. I know what I saw, and it wasn't a man in a suit. It wasn't a helicopter. WINR, the quiet farming town of Harrington in Litchfield County became the epicenter of one of Connecticut's most perplexing UFO encounters on October 26, 2002. That night, a series of extraordinary events would unfold that would challenge everything people thought they knew about what might exist beyond our word. It started just before 9:30 p.m. when teenagers Ashley R. and her cousin Daniel were walking their dog near North Road. What they witnessed defied explanation. 3 glowing spheres arranged in a perfect triangle, descending silently through the trees. "I wasn't flying, it was waiting, watching," Daniel would later recount. At first, they thought it might be a helicopter, but there were no typical aircraft markers, no sound, no rotor wash, no navigation lights. Simultaneously, just over 3 miles away, farmer Greg Whitman experienced something equally strange. While locking his shed, he noticed his floodlights suddenly blink and then cut out completely. When he turned around, 3 white lights hovered precisely above the tree line. They remained motionless, unnaturally still, before beginning to rotate and rise vertically. The 911 dispatch received a frantic call at 9:47 p.m. "It's above my car. I can't move. I swear to God, something's out here," the caller stammered, voice trembling. Before the dispatcher could respond, the line went dead. Officer Robert LaRusso was immediately dispatched. Within 5 minutes, he was heading west toward Route 118, unaware that this night would dramatically alter his career and become part of one of the most compelling documented UFO events in state history. The lights were unlike anything witnessed before. Bright white orbs with pulsing blue centers that hovered without sound, defying all logical explanation. Multiple unrelated witnesses corroborated the sightings, painting a chilling picture of something not of this world, approaching closer than anyone could have imagined. For over 3 decades, this incident has remained unexplained, a mystery that continues to provoke questions and challenge our understanding of what might exist beyond our immediate perception. That night in Harwinton unfolded like an unexplained mystery. Officer LaRusso was first on the scene, parking near South Road just before 10 p.m. The lights he spotted matched earlier witness descriptions. 3 brilliant points forming a perfect triangle, hanging motionless in the sky. His radio transmission crackled with urgency. "Dispatch, this is Unit 3. I've got eyes on 3 unidentified lights over South Ridge. Stationary. No noise. This is no aircraft. Repeat, this is no aircraft." Seconds later, the lights moved with impossible speed, pivoting and shooting straight upward faster than the human eye could track. When LaRusso looked again, the sky was empty. Other witnesses soon came forward. Mike Donnelly and Sarah Weiss, jogging at Harwinton Golf Club, were suddenly bathed in an intense blue-white light. Weiss felt nauseated and short of breath. Donnelly, a former Army medic, reported ringing ears and a sunburn-like skin reaction. Her digital watch stopped at 9:58 p.m. Another critical incident occurred on Route 118. A driver's vehicle stalled under a bright hovering light. After calling 911, the light vanished and the car mysteriously restarted. Over the next 2 days, Harwinton PD received over a dozen independent reports describing identical phenomena: triangle-shaped lights, an eerie blue glow, and complete silence. the Mutual UFO Network quickly launched an investigation. They collected soil samples, recorded witness statements, and found scorched tree bark at the original sighting location. Stranger still, some trees showed chemical changes in their leaves and bark, suggesting exposure to extreme heat or radiation. Additional evidence emerged from unexpected sources. A retired electrical engineer submitted a personal log showing a home power grid fluctuation at 10:01 p.m., matching the Route 118 event. An internal memo from Connecticut Light and Power revealed two unexplained power surges that night, one at 9:43 p.m. and another at 10:22 p.m., with no apparent cause. No, he wasn't questioned much, but sources said no radar irregularities were detected in the region initially. A private air traffic technician from Bradley International Airport later challenged this claim, anonymously admitting a brief radar anomaly occurred during the incident. Officer LaRusso's own dashcam footage provided the most significant confirmation, though it mysteriously vanished after his cruiser went in for routine maintenance weeks later. LaRusso subsequently left the department. When researchers contacted him a year later, he offered a cryptic response: "I know what I saw. So does my department." Other witnesses remained steadfast in their accounts, avoiding media attention. Ashley, the teenager who first witnessed the lights, became a nurse and only revisited the story when investigators approached her in 2010. "It stayed with me," she said. "People might laugh at UFO claims, but those who were there that night would understand differently." Unlike other UFO cases riddled with inconsistencies, the Harwinton nightlights distinguished themselves through remarkable consistency, precise timing, and trace evidence. The absence of any natural or military explanation lends credibility to those who believe the event was genuinely extraordinary. To this day, the police report remains sealed, the dashcam tape unrecovered, and the sightings unexplained. On quiet fall nights in Harwinton, residents still cast occasional glances skyward, wondering if the lights might return, not to entertain or announce themselves, but to remind a select few that something once visited and might come again. The Yumbo Encounter, March 1993. Yumbo, Val del Cauca, Colombia. It began with a flicker. At precisely 2:17 a.m. in March 1993, the lights in the Yumbo Power Substation's control room blinked and dimmed momentarily. For the engineers working that night, trained to detect even the slightest grid anomalies, this was enough to halt all conversation. Located near the industrial town of Yumbo, this substation was crucial to Colombia's southwestern region, supplying electricity to Cali and surrounding communities. Senior technician Jaime Enrique Manes, with 18 years at the facility, was monitoring the overnight feed when the surge alert triggered. A red indicator flashed. Then a cascade of alarms followed. Something was rapidly draining power. The night crew, 3 engineers and 2 security personnel, watched in growing concern. The night shift at the electrical substation started like any other, with routine checks and system monitoring. Engineers Maz and Ricardo Fonca were moving toward the high-voltage switchyard when something extraordinary caught their eye. Hovering silently about 100 meters above the northwestern corner of the compound was a metallic disc, roughly 10 meters in diameter. Its faint orange glow was unlike anything they had ever seen. As they approached the fence, strange things began happening. Instruments started malfunctioning, cameras shorted out, and radio communications dropped. Then came the pulse. Without warning, a blinding wave of blue and white light surged outward from the object, hitting the substation with a concussive force. All 5 men ducked instinctively. Sparks burst from transformers and consoles in the control room lit up with cascading failures. The entire substation went dark. Mames later described it as a silent explosion that left only impact in its wake. Panic swept through the facility. Engineers rushed to execute emergency protocols while security staff locked down entrances. Attempts to contact the central grid operator in Bogota failed. All phone lines were dead. Within minutes, the craft ascended straight upward and vanished, leaving no sonic boom or acceleration noise. Power did not return immediately. It took until the next morning for partial service to resume. When repair crews arrived, they were stunned by the damage. Entire external switchgear panels were fused. Wiring inside concrete junction boxes had melted, not burned, as if subjected to intense electromagnetic heat. Concrete footings showed signs of charring and fracturing, despite no internal explosion. Scorch marks ringed the substation's northern fence line, yet no fire was recorded. Internal logs were scrambled, with time codes corrupted between 2:17 and 2:21 a.m. One analog paper chart, maintained as a redundancy, recorded a current flow spike exceeding 200% nominal levels, precisely coinciding with a described light pulse. By midday, news of the incident reached the Colombian Electrical Double Authority, ISA. They issued a brief statement acknowledging an unexplained equipment malfunction and assured the public that supply was restored. But the engineers on the ground knew something far more extraordinary had occurred. Now, at the Yumbo electrical grid, something extraordinary happened that defied conventional explanation. Engineers witnessed an event that would challenge their understanding of reality. In the aftermath, internal memos circulated between the plant and ISA headquarters, revealing the depth of the incident's impact. Some memos referenced aerial interference of unknown origin, while others warned that further questioning could lead to disciplinary action. Despite potential consequences, Meneses refused to be silenced. Weeks later, speaking anonymously to a local journalist, he provided a detailed and consistent account. He emphasized that the unidentified object was not merely a passive observer but seemed to have intentional interactions with the electrical infrastructure. Vonka, in a rare audio interview, echoed this sentiment, insisting it was far more than a typical electrical anomaly. Public reaction was split. Skeptics dismissed the story as hysteria, but others found credibility in consistent sightings from Yumbo and nearby Cali residents. Amateur videos and radio station calls described a glowing orange object in the sky. UFO investigators from Bogota attempted to reach out to the engineers, though most remained anonymous, with Manes being the exception after submitting his resignation. Manes claimed the internal pressure to retract his account became unbearable. An independent analysis by retired electrical engineer Luis Carranza in 1995 concluded that the damage to equipment could not be explained by standard electrical failures. His report to the Colombian Institute of Electrical Engineering went unacknowledged. The Colombian government never initiated an official investigation. Over time, international UFO researchers began referencing the Yumbo encounter in publications about electromagnetic interference, drawing parallels with similar incidents like the Cash Landram case in Texas and the Rendlesham Forest incident in the UK. The pattern was disturbingly consistent: aerial objects, pulse waves, power disruptions, and physical damage. To this day, the engineers present at Yumbo maintained their account. Meneses, now retired, occasionally shares his story, but only under strict conditions of anonymity. D. In August 1977, a routine railway track inspection near 14 de las Flores in Veracruz, Mexico, turned into an extraordinary encounter. 3 workers, Antonio Garcia, Luis Ariano, and Julio Mendes, set out on a night patrol after 10 p.m., following standard maintenance protocols for checking tracks prone to mudslides during rainy seasons. As they walked along the track, Julio suddenly stopped, drawing his colleagues' attention to a strange sight. A soft amber glow pulsed rhythmically in the distance, about 300 meters away. Initially thinking it might be a work vehicle, the group cautiously approached. What they discovered defied all rational explanation. A metallic disc approximately 10 meters in diameter hovered just 2 meters above the ground. The craft was silent, with a dull silver surface featuring a central band of rotating lights in pale greens and oranges. It sat perfectly still in an overgrown clearing about 50 meters from the main track. A hatch beneath the craft opened, extending a ramp to the grass. 2 humanoid figures emerged, standing around 5 feet tall. They wore tight-fitting suits that shimmered in the moonlight. Their heads appeared slightly enlarged, and their movements were described as graceful, methodical, and distinctly non-human. These beings began systematically moving through the field, stopping at various bushes and low-lying plants. Each carried an unidentified object, seemingly conducting some form of investigation or sampling. In a later email exchange with researcher Diego Marquez, a witness reflected on the event. "I was not from his world. I don't know what I wanted, but I saw it. We all did." The encounter raised profound questions. Was this an object feeding on the electrical grid? Or was the blackout a side effect of its mere presence? Regardless of the explanation, the incident left deep scars. both on the power station and in the minds of those who witnessed it. The 14 Dallas Flores landing on August 17, 1977, remains one of Mexico's most intriguing UFO cases. Not two railway workers, Antonio and Julio, were on a routine patrol when they encountered something extraordinary. Their routine suddenly shattered when they spotted a strange device moving slowly over the vegetation. With methodical precision, the beings they saw plucked samples and stored them in small containers attached to their belts. Antonio stood motionless, whispering a prayer. Julio, backing away, accidentally snapped a twig. The sound broke the eerie silence, causing one of the beings to turn sharply toward them. A deep, low-frequency hum erupted from the disc, vibrating through the workers' chests. The light band around the craft transformed from amber to a searing white. The beings quickly retreated to their ramp. Panic erupted. Julio dropped his lamp and yelled for the others to run. They fled toward the main track line, radioing in fragments of what they had witnessed. Local authorities responded swiftly. Within an hour, law enforcement from Cordoba arrived, accompanied by railway supervisors and military personnel who were conducting infrastructure drills nearby. The site remained warm with telling evidence. Vegetation showed clear signs of heat exposure. Scorched, brittle leaves and circular grass patterns marked where the craft had hovered. Police photographs documented 3 equidistant indentations forming a triangle, approximately 3 meters across. Notably, no conventional vehicle tracks or footprints were found except those of the witnesses. Local newspapers like Diario de Xalapa and El Mundo de Cortiva published the story under the headline Lucis Mysteriosus N14, featuring black and white photos and official statements. Antonio Garcia's quote captured the incident's otherworldly nature. It was not from here. The air, the light, the way it moved. It was something else. The railway company's official inquiry supported the workers' credibility. Employment files showed no history of disciplinary issues or fabrication. Multiple interviews revealed consistently detailed accounts. Investigators from CFEC and Mexico City conducted further analysis. While radiation levels were not dangerously high, they exceeded regional background levels. Thermal imaging confirmed residual heat patterns in the soil, corroborating the workers' extraordinary testimony. Over the months that followed, local residents continued to report unusual occurrences. Dogs barked at empty skies while strange lights hovered over sugarcane fields. Farmers discovered peculiar signs, like silvery ash beneath banana trees. CFEA investigated samples containing traces of magnesium and barium, though agricultural fertilizers could potentially explain these findings. The railway workers' lives were permanently altered by the experience. Julio left his position within a year, plagued by recurring nightmares and stress. Antonio and Luis maintained a low profile, providing occasional interviews but consistently avoiding public UFO conventions. They preferred to let their original police statements speak for themselves. While the 14 Das Flores incident eventually faded from broader public consciousness, it remained significant within Mexico's UFO research community. The encounter was notable for its multiple witnesses, physical evidence, and immediate police response. Surviving private archives still hold photographs of the damaged site, thermal anomalies, and the frantic radio call. Questions lingered about the being's purpose. Were they collecting biological or chemical samples? The methodical nature of their activity suggested a deliberate goal, perhaps cataloging Earth's flora for some unknown analysis. The truth remained elusive, veiled behind the craft's sudden departure, yet for those present, the memory was forever seared into their minds. A quiet summer night had transformed into a historic moment. An ordinary patrol shattered by the extraordinary. The Kira incident of August 25, 1972. In Kochi Prefecture, Japan, the rice fields of Kira shimmered under the midday sun during summer break. Cicadas buzzed, and children roamed freely along narrow dirt paths and canals. A group of curious schoolboys, including 13-year-old Mayo Matsuoka and his brother, wandered near a rice field's edge. Suddenly, something caught Mio's eye. A strange metallic object hovering just above the ground, about 15 meters away. The small village of Kira was about to become the center of an extraordinary story. On a quiet summer day, something unusual caught the attention of several local children. An object that defied explanation. It was tiny, shaped like a flattened dome with a slight lip, gleaming in the sunlight. and rotating silently. The boys standing nearby were instantly transfixed. Their usual playful summer activities came to an abrupt halt. One let out a suppressed yelp, while another instinctively grabbed a rock, throwing it at the mysterious object. In response, the object bobbed slightly before shooting upward at an impossible speed, disappearing over the treetops. Excitement overcame their initial shock. The children raced back to the village, breathlessly sharing their incredible encounter. As expected, their wild tale was met with laughter and disbelief. Parents dismissed it as childish imagination, but one boy named Mio wasn't willing to let the story fade away. Determined to find proof, Mio borrowed a camera and returned to the site multiple times. His persistence paid off on August 28th when the object reappeared. This time, he was prepared. He captured multiple photographs of the disc-shaped object spinning and darting around the field, hovering just a meter off the ground before vanishing in a zigzag pattern. The images were grainy but surprisingly clear. They revealed a silver-toned object with a slightly raised central dome, reflecting light in a way that captivated viewers. Local media quickly picked up the story, and national outlets soon followed. Even Mio's teachers, while skeptical, noted the unusual consistency of his account. What made the story truly compelling was the corroboration from multiple witnesses. At least 8 students claimed to have seen the object on various occasions. Their descriptions were remarkably similar: a silver, rotating object capable of sudden, unpredictable movements. Some even reported hearing a low humming sound. One boy claimed he had attempted to trap it with a fishing net, only to have it dart away at the last moment. As the story spread, skeptics began suggesting the object might be a sophisticated remote-controlled toy or drone. However, the children's consistent testimonies and Mio's photographs continued to intrigue both locals and researchers alike, transforming a small village encounter into a minor media sensation across Japan. Rural landscape of 1972 Japan. A mysterious occurrence challenged local understanding. When boys first described a strange object moving in unusual ways, drone technology was non-existent at the civilian level. No local manufacturers or enthusiasts could explain the mechanical object's behavior. The school's science teacher attempted to recreate the images using model airplanes and reflective discs, but failed to replicate the motion blur or object details. As initial skepticism faded, villagers began keeping a vigilant watch. A few older residents reported fleeting glimpses of silver flashes near the fields, though none managed to capture photographic evidence. The situation took an unexpected turn on September 1st when Mo's younger brother claimed an extraordinary encounter. According to his account, he returned alone to the field after hearing a familiar humming sound. The object, approximately 20 centimeters wide, descended and settled in the grass. When he touched it, he found it warm with a smooth metallic surface, devoid of visible seams or screws. Before he could investigate further, the object began to vibrate, slipped from his grasp, and shot skyward. He returned home with minor burns, not serious, but enough to draw local teachers' attention. Soon after, the rice fields where the boys reported sightings showed unusual characteristics. Several patches exhibited stunted or yellowed rice plants. The area's agricultural cooperative inspected the site. While avoiding direct UFO discussions, one official quietly admitted to the press that the soil in those patches appeared unusually compacted and dry, as if exposed to intense heat. Media attention grew, and a local newspaper published photographs and interviews. UFO researchers from the Japan Space Phenomena Society, JSPS, traveled to Kira, interviewing the children and examining photographic negatives. Their report concluded the photos were likely authentic, with no signs of tampering or fabrication. Despite this, no official government investigation was launched. Japan's defense agency remained silent, and mainstream scientific circles dismissed the incident as an exaggerated childhood fantasy. Yet for many locals, the encounters continued, leaving an indelible mark on their collective memory. In Kira, a quiet rural community, something extraordinary happened that would captivate UFO researchers for decades. Strange aerial lights appeared during the early evening, with witnesses reporting white and blue flashes darting across the sky. Radios mysteriously cut out when these lights became visible, adding to the intrigue. School teachers, initially skeptical, began documenting unusual occurrences. On September 12th, one teacher noted an odd flicker over the north field, accompanied by an abrupt silence of cicadas. The incident profoundly affected Mitio and his friends, who became increasingly withdrawn at school while constantly pursued by news crews seeking interviews. Mo later reflected that taking the photographs wasn't about potential ridicule, but about a lingering sense of being watched long after the sighting ended. Though the case faded from national attention, it remained vivid in Kira's collective memory. Decades later, UFO researchers continued to reference these photos as some of the most compelling visual evidence of a daylight encounter in modern Japanese history. The original prints and negatives were carefully preserved by a small UFO archive in Osaka and even displayed at a private exhibition in 2007. Witnesses, now adults, consistently maintained their original accounts, their stories unchanged and unwavering. The Kira incident stands out not for dramatic abductions or government conspiracies, but for its remarkable simplicity. Honest rural children witnessed something inexplicable, documented it, and steadfastly defended their experience. Researchers continue to speculate about the object's nature. Was it a probe, a scout, or a malfunctioning drone from another civilization? Some folklorists suggest a more spiritual interpretation, perhaps a modern manifestation of a kami, a supernatural force from Japanese traditions appearing in a technological form to children's eyes. Ultimately, the strange object over Kira's rice fields came and went, leaving behind more questions than answers, and a set of haunting photographs that continue to intrigue and mystify. No. A gentle wind carried soft bleats across the open pasture. Silence hung heavy that night. The highlands, usually so familiar, felt strange. Martin Ramos, his brother Julio, and their cousin Mateo knew every rocky inch of these fields where they had worked for years, but something felt different. The animals sensed it too, restless and uneasy. Around midnight, an unexpected orange glow caught Martin's eye, rising over the southern ridge. At first he thought it might be a distant campfire or torch, but the light grew, brighter, more focused, descending silently into the valley below. What emerged defied logic. A glowing orb, roughly the size of a small car, hovered just above the field. It pulsed gently, casting long shadows and bathing the pasture in an amber light. Moving slowly and deliberately, it made no sound. The three men stood completely still. Then they saw it. A tall, humanoid figure stood near the orb, no more than 10 meters away, completely motionless. Over 2 meters tall, its skin or suit a silvery gray. It watched them, unmoving. An eerie silence descended, interrupted only by the sheep's frantic movements. Some tried to escape their enclosures while others huddled trembling on the ground. Julio later described time seeming to stop. Panic took over. Martin shouted for them to run. They fled down the slope, hearts racing, stumbling over uneven ground. When they reached a lower pasture and looked back, both the orb and the figure had vanished. By morning, news had spread through the village. Initially hesitant, the shepherds eventually gave a full account to local authorities. The police, skeptical but respectful, accompanied them to investigate. What they found was remarkable. A large circular patch of dead grass where the orb had hovered, with soil turned dry and brittle. Nearby rocks were scorched black. Veterinarians examining the sheep noted elevated stress levels and increased heart rates. Surprisingly, none were physically injured. However, several animals refused to return to that pasture for weeks afterward. Soon, radio stations in Cusco were broadcasting the extraordinary story. Not, a mysterious encounter near a Peruvian valley became a local legend that would haunt the region for years. University researchers from Cusco arrived to investigate, taking soil samples that revealed unusual mineral patterns. Their initial analysis showed no chemical contamination or radioactivity, with one researcher cryptically noting that the findings were unlike anything from natural weathering or agricultural processes. Martin Ramos was deeply affected by the experience. His nights were filled with vivid dreams of the entity, not threatening, but profoundly unsettling. He described feeling examined without physical contact, as if something was curious, yet intentionally distant. Over time, he meticulously documented his memories in a notebook, creating increasingly precise sketches of the orb and the being he had encountered. Local perspectives varied. The town priest interpreted the event as a spiritual warning, while an elder farmer recalled similar orb sightings near Lake Titicaca during his youth. An old Quechua tale resurfaced speaking of silent watchers, beings who appear only to understand mankind. The location became known as El Claro del Silencio, the clearing of silence. Unusual phenomena persisted, crops withered quickly, the soil remained inexplicably dry even during rainy seasons, and children whispered about a silent figure roaming the hills after dark. Martin and his family eventually moved down the valley in 2004, never returning to the upper pasture. Despite this, the incident continued to attract travelers, researchers, and spiritual seekers. Small expeditions came searching for answers, with some leaving with strange readings and others with nothing. Yet almost all reported the same sensation, that the land itself felt watched. In 2015, a local news crew revisited the story, uncovering an archived radio interview from 2002 where Julio had stated, "I didn't threaten us. I didn't chase us. But when it looked at me, I knew we weren't supposed to be there. That place was meant for something else." No further sightings occurred in the valley after 2002. However, strange lights continued to be observed across the Andes, silent, flickering apparitions lingering over mountain ridges before vanishing without a trace. Martin passed away in 2020, leaving behind a story that would continue to intrigue and mystify. Notebook, his pair. Notebook he had kept. One quote stood out, "I could have hurt us, but I didn't. I only wanted to be seen. Or maybe I wanted us to know that we were the ones being studied. The sheep have long since returned to the hill, but the locals still give the pasture a wide berth when the sun goes down." No aircraft were reported in the region that night. No satellites passed overhead. The Sequani entity encounter remains one of Peru's most puzzling rural UFO cases. Quiet, sudden, and never repeated. The calm, tall figure did nothing, but its presence changed everything. It begins like a myth, but it's all too real. On a humid summer evening in 2007, a Danish backpacker named Lars Jensen stood on the rim of Mount Yazur, the active volcano that dominates the southeastern flank of Tanna Island. He was alone except for his handheld camcorder and a local guide, Jonah, from the nearby village of Sulphur Bay. The volcano rumbled gently beneath their feet, the night air thick with the tang of sulfur and salt. Lars had been filming the frequent eruptions, pillars of lava exploding into the air, when suddenly, without warning, a silent sphere of bluish-white light drifted slowly upward from within the crater. It hovered mid-air for a moment, then zipped out of frame in a motion too fast for the naked eye. He glanced at Jonah, startled. "Spirit," Jonah said, as if that explained everything. Mount Yasa has been erupting nearly continuously for hundreds of years, earning it the nickname the Lighthouse of the Pacific. But, beginning in the early 2000s, an unusual pattern of phenomena began to catch attention. Luminous spheres described by witnesses as glowing orbs would appear above or even inside the crater. Some entered the mouth of the volcano, lingered, and then exited unscathed, unaffected by the molten chaos within. At first, these were chalked up to atmospheric oddities or camera glare, but over the years, tourists from France, Australia, New Zealand, and Japan reported sightings. Lars would later upload the clip to an obscure travel blog. It gathered dust and digital obscurity until it was rediscovered 5 years later, around the time more researchers began converging on Tanna Island, not for tourism, but for answers. Locals had long accepted them as part of the natural order, manifestations of the ancestral sky spirits they had always known. From 2003 involves a French couple, Marie and Philippe Dupont, who witnessed a nighttime volcanic eruption. 2 luminous spheres emerged from the ash cloud, hanging silently in the sky, like watchful eyes observing the island. For nearly a minute, they hovered before rising straight up and vanishing behind a starry curtain. Their camera caught only a faint trace of light, but the memory remained vivid. Marie would later recall in a travel documentary, "I felt alive." Amateur geologists like Dr. Greg Hammond took notice. By 2009, he had made multiple trips to Tanna to document geological data, but became increasingly fascinated by the orbs. In interviews, he emphasized the unexplainable nature of these light spheres entering a volcano without disintegrating. Local perspectives differed from scientific scrutiny. In Sulphur Bay and surrounding villages, these orbs were simply part of daily life. Children were warned against following them into the jungle. Elders spoke of owl-like beings who moved through Mount Yasa's heart. Community stories varied. One chief claimed the orbs protected ancestors from colonial invaders, while others insisted they had been appearing since time immemorial. Some villagers believed the orbs emerged during specific moon phases, or when visitors from certain lands were present. Whispers suggested foreign soldiers during World War II had witnessed similar phenomena, with rumors of subsequent cover-ups. Intriguingly, the most credible accounts came from guides who escorted tourists to the crater. Despite seeing the orbs dozens of times, these experienced professionals still gasped in awe with each appearance. In 2011, a German research team arrived with advanced video equipment, sensors, and thermal imaging tools. Over 3 weeks, they recorded several eruptions but failed to capture an orb. On their final night, a guide named Cappy convinced them to stay 1 more hour. That night, 2 pale green light spheres appeared inside the crater. The archived footage shows the lights hovering just above the magma for nearly 45 seconds before fading without a trace. Thermal readings revealed no abnormal heat signature from the orbs, a pattern that left scientists perplexed. Typically, plasma generates heat, but these lights defied such expectations. Massive heat surrounded the landscape, but the strange phenomenon seemed impervious to standard combustion rules. During 2012, a documentary crew from NHK arrived to explore volcano tourism and unexpectedly captured remarkable footage. While interviewing local residents, they recorded a significant piece of evidence, a basketball-sized light orb floating silently past the crater's edge in full daylight. The video documented birds scattering, a dog barking, and then complete stillness. This orb paused briefly over the crater's mouth, shuddered, and then rapidly shot vertically into the clouds. Skeptics attempted to explain the event through theories like ball lightning, camera artifacts, or misidentified drones. However, these explanations lost credibility with each subsequent sighting. No drone could withstand 1000-degree volcanic gases, and no known atmospheric phenomenon demonstrated such apparent sentience or environmental interaction. Local residents held a different perspective. To them, these orbs were living entities, watchers or messengers. Elders believed the orbs originated from within the Earth, not from space. One storyteller described the volcano as a world's womb, with the orbs representing its breath. Anthropologists became increasingly intrigued, discovering oral traditions about these lights that predated electricity and aviation. The persistent question remained, what had these people been observing throughout generations? Were these lights constant companions to the volcanic mountain, previously overlooked? Despite research efforts, the orbs remained enigmatic. They appeared unpredictably, often avoiding documentation. Between 2003 and 2013, credible sightings occurred approximately every 4 to 6 months. Interestingly, villagers began reporting pre-sighting dreams involving light, mysterious music, or ancestral whispers from the jungle. A respected midwife claimed the orbs attended childbirth ceremonies as witnesses, while unverifiable, the consistent dream reports among unrelated villagers attracted significant research attention. By 2013, sightings decreased. Some attributed this to climate changes, while others believed the volcano had spiritually quieted. The final documented sighting in October 2013 came from Dutch volcanologist Peter van der Mee, who was recording gas emissions on the southern slope when an orange sphere appeared. 9 near Valencia, Spain, on November 11, 1979, something extraordinary unfolded in the night sky over the Mediterranean. Just after 11 p.m., Iberia Flight JK297, a super caravel operated by TAI, was cruising smoothly from Salzburg, Austria toward Las Palmas in the Canary Islands. The flight crew, Captain Francisco Javier Lero Deada, co-pilot Ramon Zuazo, and flight engineer Francisco Javier Rodriguez, had just left the Balearic Islands behind. Suddenly, 2 powerful red orbs appeared, glowing steadily in the darkness and trailing their aircraft at an unnerving distance. Initially believing it was another aircraft, Captain Lero attempted radio contact. No response came. These lights behaved unlike normal navigation beacons, too bright, too fixed, and increasingly close. At 23:45, growing concern for the 109 passengers aboard, Lero contacted Barcelona's control tower, reporting an unidentified traffic shadowing their plane. Air traffic control found no corresponding radar blip. The object remained invisible to civilian aviation systems, continuing to close in on the aircraft. Faced with this inexplicable situation, Captain Lero made a historic decision. He declared an emergency, diverting the flight to the nearest large airport in Valencia and initiating a descent. The mysterious object followed. Later, he published a brief scientific bulletin note concluding, "We are dealing with something unique, either a natural phenomenon never before categorized or something far stranger." Mount Yasur still erupts today, unchanged. Tourists continue to visit, and local guides still watch the sky. Though no definitive answer has been reached, the sightings remain burned into the collective memory of those who encountered them. Maybe they are Earthborn anomalies. Maybe they are sentient observers. Or perhaps, like the volcano itself, they've always been with us, older than science, older than story, watching from the breath of the earth. The flight of JK-297 took an unexpected turn when two red lights appeared, perfectly mirroring the aircraft's descent. These weren't typical navigation lights. At a certain point, the lights split into multiple smaller formations, yet the cabin remained surprisingly calm. While passengers were largely unaware, tension gripped the cockpit. Flight crews trained for turbulence, equipment failures, and potential hijackings now faced something completely beyond their standard protocols. On November 12th, the Super Caravel landed safely at Valencia Airport, and the moment it touched down, the mysterious lights vanished into the night sky. But the story was far from over. Minutes after landing, the Spanish Air Force received an urgent call. A Mirage F-1 interceptor from Los Llanos Air Base in Albite was immediately dispatched. Lieutenant Fernando Comra, a 26-year-old pilot known for his exceptional skills and composure, took on the mission. At 10:100 hours, Comra launched in his Mirage, rapidly climbing and scanning for visual or radar contact. His orders were clear: identify and engage if necessary. As he approached the last reported location of JK-297, his onboard radar locked onto an object hovering around 30,000 feet. The contact behaved strangely, moving fast and making sudden, unpredictable altitude changes. Comra accelerated to Mach 1.4, but no matter how hard he pushed, the object remained frustratingly ahead. He later described it as a red light, moving with an almost intelligent precision. At one point, the object performed a vertical climb that defied every known aircraft capability of the Spanish Air Force. Losing radar lock, Comra was left staring into an empty sky. Suddenly, the object reappeared behind him. Believing it might be a hostile aircraft with advanced technology, he initiated evasive maneuvers. Instead of engaging, the object simply vanished. Returning to base at 3 a.m., Comra was perplexed. During his debriefing with military intelligence, he detailed his radar lock, visual confirmation, and the unusual energy signals his equipment had registered. Up to this point, no pilot had ever pursued a UFO over Spanish airspace. The next day, news of the aerial incident leaked to the press. Spanish newspapers erupted with coverage, dubbing it the Manasís incident after the town nearest to the airport. Television channels broadcast extensive segments, turning a mysterious flight into a national talking point. The Manasís incident became a landmark event in European UFO history, the first and only commercial airline flight ever forced to divert due to an unidentified aerial phenomenon. In 1990, something extraordinary happened that would spark intense speculation and debate about unknown technologies and potential extraterrestrial encounters. Military officials found themselves caught off guard when a civilian aircraft unexpectedly changed course during its flight. Lieutenant Camera, scrambled to investigate, pursued an object that defied conventional explanation. The Air Force response and subsequent events drew unprecedented attention, leading to a historic moment when the UFO phenomenon was first raised in the Spanish national legislature. Parliamentary representatives demanded answers. Military sources released a limited report acknowledging the emergency landing and pilot statements, but offered no conclusive explanation. Civilian investigators like journalist Juan José Benítez conducted extensive interviews with the flight crew and Lieutenant Camera. The pilots remained resolute. What they encountered was real and controlled, not a natural occurrence. The Ministry of Transport quietly interviewed all 109 passengers. While most remained unaware of the incident's full significance, some reported seeing unusual flashing lights outside their windows. Radar logs from the Air Force were immediately classified, with attempts to access them under Freedom of Information laws swiftly denied. Skeptics proposed various explanations: misidentified aircraft, flares, or reflections. Some suggested a NATO exercise or secret aerial maneuver. However, no aircraft in the region matched the descriptions, and no military drills were scheduled. The radar signature and energy interference, reported by cameras jet, remained unexplained. In 1994, the Spanish Air Force declassified documents related to the incident. While confirming the flight diversion, military scramble, and radar anomalies, they provided no definitive explanation. The official stance remained neutral, unidentified aerial phenomena. Today, the Manassas incident continues to intrigue researchers. No human-made aircraft has been proven capable of the maneuvers observed that day. No military force has claimed responsibility. The event stands as a unique and unexplained chapter in aviation history, challenging our understanding of what might exist beyond conventional knowledge. Captain Liardo, who retired with honor, maintained his story until his final interview. No satellite debris or weather anomaly was identified. Night flights continue over Valencia and the Balearic coasts, with some pilots still glancing into the dark sky, remembering the night when something fast, bright, and unknown chased down a passenger plane and left a country demanding answers. Height 611 crash, January 29, 1986. Dalnagorsk, Soviet Union. The night sky over Dalnagorsk was cold and clear, cutting through wool coats and rattling old window panes. At precisely 7:55 p.m., a strange, silent glow appeared in the southeast just above the jagged hills. Miners, children, shopkeepers, and schoolteachers all stood transfixed. A red-orange sphere glided across the sky, slow, soundless, and completely out of place. This wasn't a falling object or a meteor. It moved deliberately, as if surveying the ground below. Eyewitnesses described an unnatural sight: a glowing orb the size of a small car flying low across the rooftops of the Soviet mining town with extraordinary precision. With a final pulse of reddish light, it dipped toward the rocky slope known as Height 611 and vanished behind the ridge. No explosion followed, no tremor. No fireball lit up the sky. Just an eerie, abrupt end that left the town of Dalnagorsk with a growing sense of unexplained mystery. Height 611 was a barren mountain slope dotted with pine trees and loose volcanic rock located just outside the town in Russia's far east, near the Sea of Japan. On the morning of January 30th, curious locals and miners set out to investigate the area where they believed the object had descended. Their discovery was extraordinary. At the approximate impact site, they found a small elliptical patch of scorched earth, roughly 2 meters wide. The surrounding vegetation had been burned unlike any typical fire pattern. Instead, it appeared subjected to intense directed heat. Trees showed unique scorching, with bark blistered and blackened on only one side. The rock beneath the impact area had partially melted, and tiny metallic fragments littered the ground. Glittering spheres caught the pale winter sunlight, defying easy explanation. Local geologists found themselves completely perplexed by the unusual material. These fragments weren't like typical meteorite debris. They weren't magnetic and couldn't be matched to any known alloy. Some fragments contained intricate mesh-like structures of unknown origin, while others held traces of rare earth elements that didn't align with Soviet or Western manufacturing technologies. The mysterious nature of the debris quickly drew scientific attention. The Regional Science Center was immediately notified. Over the next few days, samples were collected and dispatched to laboratories in Vladivostok and Moscow. The joint team of scientists and military officials descended on the site, which was quickly transformed into a heavily guarded zone. For weeks, the once-idle slope became a restricted area, watched around the clock. Years later, scientific reports revealed extraordinary details. The metal fragments possessed a composition that defied conventional understanding. Metallurgists were stunned by alloys seemingly fused at temperatures far beyond typical aerospace or industrial capabilities. The microspheres displayed an unprecedented structural uniformity that should not occur naturally and exceeded the technological limits of Soviet metallurgy. Remarkably, the site showed no radiation, a stark contrast to typical UFO crash narratives. Instead, electromagnetic instruments detected wildly unpredictable readings that continued to puzzle physicists for years. Local speculation ran wild. In cafes and apartment blocks, residents traded theories. Some believed it was a malfunctioning foreign satellite. Others were convinced of extraterrestrial involvement. But everyone agreed on one thing: this was no hallucination. Multiple witnesses reported seeing an orb gliding across the night sky. Irina S., a local woman, described watching the sphere hover momentarily before dropping behind the ridge. "It moved like no plane or helicopter I've ever seen," she said. "It felt alive, not something falling, but something observing, thinking." In the aftermath, rumors spread of military trucks transporting several crates of material out of Dagor under heavy guard. No official announcement was made, and no record existed of the sample's destination. In the following months, several locals reported mysterious health issues after visiting the crash site, including fatigue, dizziness, and skin irritation. 9 over Dalagorsk on January 29, 1986, something extraordinary occurred that has defied explanation for decades. A mysterious object descended slowly and then vanished, leaving behind scorched terrain and a trail of unanswered questions. Russian ufologist Valery Vozhilny spent years investigating the incident, concluding that if the object was indeed a craft, it likely experienced a malfunction during a controlled landing attempt. The lack of a crater, explosive residue, or typical crash patterns suggested the object either disintegrated in a non-explosive manner or was swiftly retrieved. Jill's research team examined samples using electron microscopes, uncovering evidence of super-dense materials constructed using techniques unknown to modern engineering. Their investigation was bolstered by interviews with over a dozen witnesses who consistently described the same slow descent and sudden disappearance. Soviet authorities maintained silence, keeping the files classified well into the 2000s. While some documentation leaked after the USSR's collapse, significant portions remain hidden. This lack of transparency only intensified speculation about the event. No satellite re-entry, meteor, or aircraft crash has been identified to explain the incident. No foreign agency claimed responsibility for a failed launch or vehicle loss. The materials found were quietly removed and dispersed to classified research labs, never matched to any known craft. Researchers have proposed various theories. Some believe it was an unmanned probe that self-destructed, while others suggest it might have been a scout craft monitoring Earth's terrain or communications before experiencing a critical failure. One physicist who analyzed the metal samples remarked off the record, "If this was built by humans, then someone on Earth is 50 years ahead of everyone else, including the military." The Height 611 incident stands apart from other UFO sightings due to its tangible debris, multiple eyewitness accounts, and extensive scientific analysis. To this day, the truth remains elusive. Without a complete wreckage, a body, or a definitive explanation, the Dalagorsk incident continues to intrigue ufologists and researchers, making it one of the most physically documented yet deeply mysterious UFO events in history. The ridge of Dalagorsk stands unmarked now, burn scars, long faded, but whispers persist about what might lie beneath the soil, fragments of metal from a machine no one can identify. Was it a test gone wrong? A probe observing Earth? Or evidence that we are not alone and never have been? In the rolling green hills of Cantal, France, a late summer morning unfolded with typical tranquility. Sheep grazed lazily. Wind drifted through grasses. Two young siblings, Francois and Anne-Marie Dial, watched over their cattle as they always did. 13-year-old Francois perched on a rock, his 9-year-old sister Anne-Marie beside him. Their task was straightforward: keep the cattle within the pastures, away from woods and village roads. Then everything changed. A soundless shift in the air caught their attention. Francois squinted toward a small hill near a stone wall. 4 small black figures stood there, humanoid but shorter than any adults, barely a meter tall, wearing tight dark suits that shimmered subtly in the morning light. At first, Francois thought they might be local children playing, but then the impossible happened. The figures began to levitate, rising smoothly as if gravity meant nothing. Just above them hovered a luminous metallic sphere, about 3 meters wide, pulsing with a soft whitish-blue glow. In perfect synchronization, the beings ascended and entered the craft's underside, which then vanished instantly. No flash, no sound, simply gone. Terrified yet driven by curiosity, Francois ran to the exact location where the figures had stood. Anne-Marie followed, tears welling in her eyes. Whatever fell that cold January night left more than scorched earth. It left enduring questions that still echo through silent hills. The Kuzak Close Encounter, August 29, 1967. A moment when everything they knew about reality shifted irrevocably. A patch of scorched grass marked the spot where an unidentified object had been, with no visible footprints around it. The nearby cattle had behaved strangely, clustering together and bellowing in clear agitation. Their reaction alone suggested this wasn't a mere fabrication. Two children raced home about a kilometer away, breathlessly telling their father what they had witnessed. Knowing his children weren't prone to inventing stories, he saw they were genuinely shaken. Within an hour, the local GME was notified, and Officer John Bouter from the Sunflower Station arrived, taking the report seriously. He carefully noted the scorched grass, the disturbed cattle, and how consistently the children described their experience. A formal report was quickly filed. The French gendarmerie escalated the case, involving medical services and scientific advisors. Francois and Anne-Marie underwent separate psychological evaluations. Doctors confirmed they were healthy and showed no signs of delusion or unrelated trauma. Their statements remained remarkably consistent, even weeks after the initial incident. The French government, already tracking increasing reports of unusual aerial phenomena across Europe during the 1960s, quietly dispatched a team from the CNES's official UFO research group. They collected soil and grass samples, conducted magnetic field tests, and took radiation readings. The scorched area indicated sudden high heat exposure, but without evidence of conventional combustion. Electromagnetic readings proved abnormal and inconclusive. While maintaining scientific neutrality, the investigative team found Officer Bolaire's personal statement compelling. He affirmed the children's sincerity, writing, "There is no question in my mind that something extraordinary occurred. These children are truthful." Local media soon caught wind of the story. Some articles mocked the children's account as a product of overactive imagination, while others treated it with cautious interest, particularly given the official investigation. Radio hosts debated whether the sighting was genuine, a prank, or a psychological phenomenon. However, most townspeople who knew the Davila family well supported the children. They weren't known for fantasy or exaggeration, which lent additional credibility to their extraordinary claim. Night Donta Fastadea reported a bright ball of light descending behind a forested area near his fields just days after the initial sighting. His sheep scattered in terror, and his dog refused to approach the spot for hours. Investigators added this to their case file, noting the proximity and timing. A week later, schoolchildren in a nearby town claimed to see small black figures floating in the air. Their teacher dismissed it as imagination, but police found something curious. When questioned, the children's drawings matched Francois and Anne-Marie's descriptions with remarkable detail. Again, no adults witnessed the event. The GN team compiled a dossier with photos, interviews, and environmental data. An internal memo, leaked to a French UFO research group in the 1980s, stated, "This case remains one of the most coherent and unexplained in the national files. Witnesses are credible. No evidence of deception or mental instability." Despite this, the official government stance remained neutral. No public conclusions were released, and the case faded from national attention. Years passed. Francois became a mechanic, and Marie a teacher. Journalists and UFO researchers would occasionally track them down, but they always told the same story, never embellished, never altered. "We didn't want this attention," Francois said in a 1990s interview, "but it happened, and we can't pretend it didn't. I saw them. They were real." Skeptics proposed alternative explanations. Could it have been pranksters in costumes with a weather balloon? Perhaps the children experienced a shared hallucination. But these theories failed to account for the scorched ground, the cattle's behavioral changes, and the matching accounts from unrelated schoolchildren days later. More importantly, the Dwilt never sought fame or money. Researchers were particularly intrigued by the nature of the levitation. The beings didn't float awkwardly or with visible propulsion. Their movement was smooth, controlled, and synchronized, as if weightless. This detail, repeated in other European encounters of the era, became a minor pattern in Cold War UFO literature. The encounter stood out because of its simplicity. There was no abduction, no communication, no lights flashing across the sky. just an unexplained moment that remained etched in the memories of those who witnessed it. Not just an ordinary day for two children doing chores, unfolding in rural France during the 1960s. Farm children, far removed from urban myths about flying saucers, experienced a moment that would forever alter their worldview. Their encounter has since become a cornerstone case in French UFO history. Researchers frequently cite this incident in comparative studies of youth sightings. The official Japan literature highlights it as one of the most credible child witness accounts. Some experts suggest that children might be more receptive to perceiving anomalous phenomena, not yet conditioned to filter out the strange. What they described, small humanoids, metallic craft, silent levitation, surprisingly aligns with thousands of other global accounts. This raises a compelling question. Did they imagine it? Or does this phenomenon follow a pattern independent of cultural boundaries? The Cussie case remains unsolved, its most haunting details unchanged. The Morristown UFO wave began differently. On a quiet January evening in 2009, Morristown, New Jersey, transformed from an ordinary suburban landscape into a scene of inexplicable mystery. As commuters returned home, streets still adorned with fading holiday lights, something extraordinary unfolded. Just after 8 p.m., reports began flooding in. Glowing red orbs floated silently in the sky, initially motionless, then drifting in what witnesses perceived as an intelligent formation. Observers noted peculiar details, lights moving against the wind, forming a distinct V-shape, hovering with an eerie precision. Local authorities and federal agencies quickly became involved. The police department, news outlets, and the Federal Aviation Administration were inundated with inquiries. Cell phone videos emerged, and a local pilot reportedly witnessed the unexplained phenomenon. The initial night was merely the beginning. On subsequent dates, January 26th, February 7th, and February 17th, the lights returned. Each time, they appeared over different neighborhoods, drawing crowds of puzzled and sometimes frightened residents. Witnesses described glowing spheres hovering high above the town, moving in straight lines or forming intricate geometric patterns before mysteriously fading away. A mother of two, among many observers, found herself caught in this inexplicable wave of aerial anomalies, adding another layer to the growing mystery of the Morristown incident. Witnesses described something entirely unprecedented, objects that remained utterly motionless, defying normal aerial behavior. Local television quickly amplified the story, transforming a local curiosity into a national conversation. Amateur UFO enthusiasts and skeptics responded differently. While some groups launched independent investigations, others dismissed the reports as conventional explanations like aircraft or weather balloons. The mystery only deepened with each subsequent appearance. In early March 2009, two science educators named Joe Rudy and Chris Russo stepped forward with a stunning revelation. They claimed responsibility for the entire phenomenon, presenting themselves as orchestrators of an elaborate hoax. Their goal, they explained, was to expose public gullibility and media incompetence. Their method was meticulous, attaching flares to helium balloons and launching them from predetermined locations at specific times. Slow-burning flares were calculated to cluster in the sky, mimicking unidentified aerial phenomena. They even documented their process, sharing video evidence of their backyard launches and flare ignitions. However, their confession didn't completely resolve the mystery. FAA radar logs from nearby Newark International Airport recorded anomalous activities on January 5th and February 7th. Air traffic controllers confirmed no approved balloon launches or aircraft in those areas during the reported times. Local witnesses challenged the flare explanation. Unlike typical flares that quickly descend and flicker, these lights reportedly maintained altitude for up to 30 minutes. They allegedly hovered and moved horizontally, contradicting expected balloon behavior, especially given the night's wind conditions. While Rudy and Russo were charged with disorderly conduct and fined for launching hazardous materials into controlled airspace, the incident left more questions than answers. The public remained divided, with some accepting their explanation and others sensing a deeper, unresolved mystery. And a commercial pilot driving with his family on February 7th described something extraordinary. These weren't ordinary flares he was seeing. Objects moved with an intelligence that defied explanation. Normal flares don't behave like this. The lights kept precise pace with each other, then unexpectedly broke formation and circled back, something helium balloons simply cannot do. Independent researchers in late 2009 dug deeper, comparing public videos with controlled balloon and flare launches. Their analysis revealed intriguing inconsistencies. While some characteristics seemed similar, critical differences emerged. The light's duration, their positional stability, and synchronized movements suggested something far more complex than a simple balloon prank. Rudy and Russo, initially linked to the events, admitted responsibility for only 3 nights of sightings. Yet eyewitness accounts and radar data confirmed additional unexplained occurrences beyond their acknowledged activities. When challenged about these discrepancies, they brushed off concerns as coincidences or misunderstandings. But skeptical investigators remained unsatisfied. Multiple FAA logs recorded anomalies, and residents across several towns reported objects that defied conventional physics. Why would supposed pranksters abandon a seemingly successful stunt midway? Some began suspecting the hoax might be a deliberate smokescreen, potentially designed to discredit genuine sightings, a tactic not unprecedented in UFO history. Former intelligence officers later cited the Morristown case as a classic example of dual-layer events, where legitimate unknown aerial activity gets obscured by an artificial narrative. A retired military analyst, speaking anonymously, described a familiar disinformation strategy: create a real incident, then drown it in noise, stage a similar-looking hoax, and discredit everything. The 2012 documentary, The Morristown Lights, explored these mysteries, interviewing residents, aviation experts, and meteorologists. Despite extensive investigation, the fundamental question remains: if not all sightings were hoaxes, what exactly did people see? The answer continues to elude definitive explanation. The Morristown UFO wave left more questions than answers, blurring the line between hoax and reality. Rudy and Russo, who orchestrated the event, largely vanished from public view after the documentaries aired. Years later, one of them briefly admitted online, "We did what we did to prove a point, but it got out of hand. Maybe we shouldn't have." Yet some residents remain steadfast in their beliefs. A retired school teacher in her 80s still speaks with conviction about what she witnessed on January 5th. "They came," she insists. "I don't care what those boys say. I saw something in the sky that wasn't from here." The most compelling aspect of the incident isn't the lights themselves, but the public reaction. It revealed how quickly mystery can capture imagination, how easily explanations can be accepted or dismissed, and how fragile truth becomes when tangled with hoaxes and headlines. More than a decade later, the Morristown lights remain an enigma. Was it all a prank? Perhaps not. The truth might lie somewhere in between, obscured by fire and helium, hidden beneath our own assumptions. Far from Morristown, another mysterious event unfolded on October 28, 1972 at Isla de Obos, Uruguay. The ocean was calm that night, with waves gently touching the rocky coast of this small, isolated island. From the top of a 59-meter lighthouse, 2 keepers watched the moon's reflection scatter across the Atlantic. Nearing midnight, it was time for their routine check. Located 8 kilometers from Punta del Este, Isla de Obos was typically quiet, visited only by rotating Navy personnel, lighthouse keepers, and marine biologists. That evening, Walter Lopez and Carlos Torres were accompanied by young Navy Lieutenant Julio Castro, temporarily stationed for oversight. After completing their second evening inspection, a strange occurrence began. The radio emitted static, not unusual for a remote post, but then a low, unusual hum emerged outside the lighthouse. Walls? Lopez paused and looked at Torres. The sound was different. Not mechanical, not marine, not resembling a passing ship or generator. It was tonal, and it was rising. The ocean's silence struck them first as they stepped outside. No rhythmic waves crashed against the shore, and the usual swarms of seabirds circling the tower were inexplicably absent. The air felt crisp, but something was different. From the eastern cliffs, a pale dome of light emerged from the sea, hovering roughly 200 meters above the waterline. It was massive, about 30 meters in diameter, and perfectly round with a dome on top. The light was soft and bluish-white, emitting no heat and producing no sound. Castro, with his naval training, instinctively grabbed his binoculars. The object appeared metallic, almost mirror-like, with no visible seams or markings. A white light tube descended slowly, sweeping circular patterns across the ocean surface. At 0030, Torres radioed the Uruguayan Navy command at Punta del Este. His voice remained controlled but carried an underlying tension as he described a non-conventional aerial phenomenon stationary above the water. Command instructed the men to remain observant and document every detail. Lopez reported something unusual beneath the surface, not a heat-related disturbance, but movement suggesting something was racing just under the water. The object hovered for 10 minutes before suddenly ascending vertically, shooting straight into the sky and vanishing within seconds. No sonic boom followed, just absolute silence. Within hours, all three men had recorded their statements. By 4 a.m., a small patrol boat was dispatched to Isla Diobos. Naval investigator Commander Luis Galeano arrived later that morning to collect physical evidence. His investigation found slightly elevated radiation levels, nothing dangerous. No signs of fire, debris, or mechanical activity were present. The lighthouse log, co-signed by all witnesses, contained precise timestamps and descriptions. Each account matched perfectly in shape, behavior, and speed of the object. Castro was particularly noteworthy, described as militarily exact in his recounting. In an unprecedented move, the Uruguayan Navy publicly acknowledged the event. Not an identified aerial object was observed by qualified personnel at Isla Diobos, prompting an official investigation. Though no definitive conclusions were reached, the openness of this declaration sparked significant interest across South America. Journalists from Montevideo and Buenos Aires quickly latched onto the story. Major newspapers like La Manana and El País ran front-page coverage, while radio hosts began interviewing retired Navy officials who hinted at similar past incidents that had previously been kept quiet. This marked one of the rare instances where a Latin American military organization publicly acknowledged an active UFO investigation. The narrative took an intriguing turn a week later when another Navy vessel patrolling the same waters reported unusual sonar activity. Lieutenant Manuel Ororebe, aboard the ship Rio Negro, described tracking a large, fast-moving underwater object shaped almost like a torpedo but unusually wide. The object was monitored for nearly 5 minutes before inexplicably vanishing without a trace or exit path. This sonar report was quietly added to the Isla Diobos file. Months later, independent researchers from Brazil and Argentina conducted their own investigations. Using thermal imaging and electromagnetic sensors, they discovered residual anomalies near the eastern cliff. These areas exhibited unusual soil compression and magnetization, with no evidence of buried man-made structures or equipment. An even more mysterious element emerged. Years later, through a leaked testimony from a former Navy officer, he revealed that a fourth witness, a radio technician stationed offshore, had detected high-frequency bursts during the event, resembling coded pulses, though no official logs had recorded such signals at the time. In subsequent years, the Uruguayan Air Force received multiple similar reports from fishing vessels near Isla Diobos. These accounts included sightings of glowing spheres entering and exiting the sea, along with strange radar pings showing no visible aircraft. Each report echoed the original 1972 incident. Despite significant public curiosity, no formal government follow-up investigation was launched after the initial inquiry. No explanations were provided, and no references to weather balloons or experimental aircraft were made. The file was closed without resolution. While skeptics argued the sighting could be a misidentified aircraft or natural phenomenon like ball lightning, experts countered that the object's characteristics, including its size, hovering ability, and rapid acceleration, defied such simple explanations. The Isla de Lobo sighting is one such case, quietly acknowledged by the Uruguayan Navy and remarkable for its consistency. Unlike sensationalized incidents like Roswell, this encounter simply exists in official records, unexplained and unchallenged. On the night of the 28th of October, 1972, something extraordinary happened on a quiet island. Whatever occurred left behind only questions, with lighthouse keepers still scanning the sea on clear nights, wondering about the mysterious beam of light that once appeared. Deep within a locked naval archive, a manila folder marked No Identificado holds the only tangible trace of this event. Far from this maritime mystery, another encounter unfolded in the farmlands of Newark Valley, New York. On April 24, 1964, Gary Wilcox was doing what farmers do, tending his land and checking manure piles as the morning mist clung to the soil. As Wilcox guided his small tractor across a secluded section of his farm, something unusual caught his eye. Resting silently in the clearing was an object unlike anything he had ever seen. A large white egg-shaped structure, about 4 feet tall, smooth and seamless. No windows, no wings, just an oblong pod, slightly elevated above the ground, approximately 75 feet from his halted tractor. This was a moment that would transform an ordinary spring morning into an extraordinary encounter, adding another layer to the complex tapestry of unexplained phenomena that continue to intrigue researchers and challenge our understanding of the world. Wilcox climbed down from his equipment, slowly approaching the silent object bathed in early morning sunlight. Despite the brightness, the object felt unnaturally cold to the touch. Suddenly, 2 small beings emerged, either from behind or within the object itself. Their appearance was unlike anything Wilcox had ever encountered. Standing about 4 feet tall, they wore seamless metallic suits that shimmered subtly in the weak light. Large heads with faces hidden behind reflective visors gave them an otherworldly appearance. Though their proportions seemed slightly off from human anatomy, they moved with remarkable grace and confidence. Surprisingly, Wilcox felt no fear. Instead, an overwhelming sense of calm and curiosity washed over him. When the beings spoke, their communication was startling. Perfect English delivered in a detached, almost mechanically translated manner. They identified themselves as scientists from another world, specifically interested in Earth's agricultural systems. They explained their choice of Wilcox was deliberate. His remote farming location made him an ideal subject. Farming, they noted, was a universal profession connected to planetary sustenance. For 2 hours, they engaged in a detailed conversation. The beings questioned Wilcox extensively about farming techniques, fertilizers, and human nutrition. In exchange, they shared their own mission, gathering comprehensive data on Earth's ecosystems and conducting organic material tests. Wilcox later described the encounter as matter-of-fact. No dramatic warnings, no grand philosophical revelations, just pure scientific inquiry. They requested anonymity, asking him not to report or photograph their visit. Wilcox agreed. As abruptly as they arrived, the egg-shaped object lifted vertically without sound, vanishing into the sky. No heat, no wind, no dramatic light show marked its departure. Stunned but unafraid, Wilcox returned to his daily chores, keeping the encounter to himself. Hours later, an almost identical incident would occur nearly 2,000 miles away in Socorro, New Mexico, when police officer Lonnie Zamora reported seeing a similar egg-shaped craft land and take off, leaving scorch marks behind. This sighting would become a landmark event, extensively investigated by Project Blue Book, the U.S. Air Force's official UFO research program. Not Wilcox's encounter with unidentified beings became a quiet sensation that slowly unfolded through careful investigation and understated detail. He initially hesitated to report what he'd witnessed, worried his story might seem derivative of the famous Zamora sighting. Local law enforcement became involved when Cox finally shared his experience with the Tioga County Sheriff's Office. Deputies thoroughly interviewed him, noting his remarkable consistency in recounting the event. The local newspaper soon picked up the story, making Cox an unexpected regional media focus. Investigators examined the field where the object had landed, finding faint grass impressions but no dramatic physical evidence like burn marks or radioactive traces. This lack of concrete proof invited skepticism, with many suggesting hallucination or fabrication. Yet Cox's demeanor contradicted such dismissals. He never sought publicity or financial gain from his experience. No paid interviews, no television appearances. Instead, he grew increasingly private. Those who knew him observed a profound change. Not paranoid, but deeply reflective, as if carrying a quiet, transformative weight. Years later, Cox revealed an intriguing detail. He'd left fertilizer near the landing site, wondering if the beings might be interested. The package disappeared overnight, adding another layer of mystery to his account. The parallels with the Zamora sighting were striking. Both involved white egg-shaped objects, occurred on the same date, and were described by credible witnesses who never wavered in their stories. Most compelling was the encounter's tone, not one of fear or threat, but of calm curiosity. The beings seemed more interested in understanding Earth's agriculture than in invasion or experimentation. They asked questions, maintained a polite demeanor, and left an indelible impression on Cox that would resonate through decades of UFO research. Not the Delphos ring of November 2nd, 1971, set in Delos, Kansas, represents one of UFO history's most grounded and perplexing encounters. Unlike many sensational UFO accounts, this incident stands out for its quiet simplicity, almost tailored to the witness's lifestyle. On that early November evening, the prairie sky hung unusually still over the Johnson family farm. 16-year-old Ron Johnson was outside tending sheep, his hands deep in his jacket pockets, scanning the dimming landscape. Suddenly, a radiant circular object hovered just above the ground near a tree line, emitting a bluish-white glow without a sound. Mesmerized, Ron stood frozen until the object smoothly ascended and vanished. UFO researchers now interpret such encounters as potential experiential studies by non-human intelligences, examining not just biological samples, but human reactions. The incident continues to be cited in cases comparing peaceful contact scenarios and low-profile visitations. The encounter raises persistent questions. Why Ron Johnson? Why a farmer? Why that specific moment? Was this truly just a scientific exchange? A brief moment of mutual curiosity across worlds? Or something more? A test, a first contact? A quiet message suggesting the extraordinary doesn't always arrive with thunder and light, but sometimes with the gentle hum of a tractor and early sunlight glinting off dewy grass. Like Willox's similar experience, Johnson's account remains largely under the radar. He never sought to embellish his story, maintaining a straightforward perspective. "I don't know what they were," echoes the sentiment of those who encounter the unexplained. "I just know I didn't imagine it." No additional sightings occurred. No definitive evidence remained. Yet the story persists. A moment when the cosmos might have reached down, not with fear, but with genuine interest in humanity's most fundamental endeavor, growing life from soil. Ron Johnson burst into his family home, his voice strained with an overwhelming sense of urgency. He demanded his parents, Darrell and Irma, come outside immediately to witness something extraordinary. When they arrived at the spot where a mysterious glowing object had been, they discovered a perfect circular formation etched into the ground. A faint, almost phosphorescent ring that would become one of the most scientifically intriguing UFO cases in United States history. The ring measured about 8 feet in diameter, slightly raised from the surrounding landscape. Its texture was distinctly different, a crusty white dehydrated surface that stood in sharp contrast to the damp earth around it. Despite recent rainfall, the area within the circle remained inexplicably dry. The family members were both curious and cautious as they examined the site. When they touched the soil, strange physical reactions began immediately. Ron's mother felt a numbing sensation in her fingers, while Darrell Johnson later reported skin irritation. Over the next few days, the family experienced a series of odd symptoms: burning eyes, tingling hands, and persistent headaches. Ron himself claimed to feel dizzy and disoriented. News of the encounter spread quickly through their small farming community. Neighbors arrived to inspect the site, confirming that the ring continued to glow. Local authorities soon became involved, with the sheriff's deputy visiting the farm, taking statements, and filing an official report. The UFO research community quickly took notice. Organizations like APRO and NICAP reached out to the Johnsons, requesting permission to study the location. Within a week, investigators arrived, collecting soil samples, photographs, and detailed eyewitness accounts. Ted Phillips, a renowned physical trace evidence specialist who had investigated hundreds of landing sites globally, became particularly interested in the case. What he and other researchers discovered would perplex scientists for years to come. The most remarkable aspect was the ring's longevity. It remained visible for several months, and was still faintly detectable more than 2 years after the initial event. Soil samples from the mysterious ring were meticulously tested across multiple scientific laboratories. The physical evidence was stunning. Even after substantial rainfall, the soil within the ring remained completely dry. This unusual characteristic suggested something extraordinary was happening. Hydrophobic compounds were detected at abnormal levels, substances that fundamentally repel water. Researchers were perplexed. No known agricultural or meteorological explanation could account for the ring's strange properties. What made the case even more intriguing were the human physiological responses. Several researchers who touched the soil later reported experiencing consistent symptoms, numbness and tingling in their hands. Photographic documentation added another layer of complexity. The Johnson family and researchers captured dozens of images over several months. These visual records revealed remarkable details. In some photographs, the ring appeared faintly luminous. Other images showed striking variations in soil texture and color. Skeptics quickly emerged with alternative theories. Some suggested fungal growth or potential hoaxing. However, laboratory testing definitively ruled out fungal spores, and the Johnson family's behavior undermined accusations of deliberate deception. They never sought media attention or financial gain. The associated UFO sighting remained the most contested element. Ron Johnson's description remained remarkably consistent, a silent, glowing object with a domed top, hovering effortlessly before ascending into the dark Kansas sky. When researchers cross-referenced this account with other regional reports from fall 1971, intriguing patterns emerged. Similar sightings of circular craft were documented in Oklahoma and Nebraska. By 1973, researchers published comprehensive findings in scientific and UFO journals. The Delos case became a landmark study, renowned for its rare combination of physical trace evidence and eyewitness testimony. UFO landings studied by mainstream scientists. Ron Johnson, years later, gave interviews reflecting on the event. He always maintained the accuracy of his account, stating that the experience had a profound impact on how he viewed the world. "I didn't ask for it," he once said, "but it made me understand that there's more going on than what we see with our eyes. What makes the Delos case so unique isn't just the sighting or the soil, it's the entire sequence. A silent, luminous object witnessed by a teenager, a perfect glowing ring left behind, physical symptoms experienced by multiple people, and soil that defies natural behavior. Independent lab results all occurred on a small farm in Kansas, with no motive for deception." Today, the Delos ring continues to be cited in serious discussions about UFO landings involving physical evidence. The soil samples preserved in lab archives still defy full explanation. Attempts to recreate the ring's properties through heat, chemicals, or organic manipulation have consistently failed. The Johnsons have since moved away, but the land where the ring once glowed remains a quiet field, unmarked and almost forgotten. Yet among UFO researchers and scientists who seek hard evidence, the Delos ring endures as one of the most compelling cases on record. No official explanation has ever been given, and no known phenomenon has been able to recreate what was left behind. Near the Gurupi River by Alagamama Marino, 4 fishermen, Jose, Miguel, Raul, and Old John, had built a small fire on a sandy bank during their usual night expedition of harvesting freshwater crayfish. Rainforest darkness enveloped them, broken only by the soft glow of their flames and distant nocturnal bird calls. Just past midnight, the firelight flickered unnaturally. The men exchanged puzzled glances. From the tree line on the opposite bank, bright lights like searchlights, intensely white and steady, slowly descended between the trees. At first, they thought it might be a passing boat or low-flying helicopter. But, as the lights approached, the calm water set no ripples. Their hum made no sound, and their brilliance didn't soften. The beams converged and illuminated their firelit camp in stark brilliance. The fishermen were shaken to their core. One moment, Raoul was diving for a crayfish basket near the river, and the next, he had vanished without a trace. Jose's panicked cry echoed through the night as Miguel and Joan raced toward the forest's edge. Bright, pulsing lights cast an unnatural radiance, making the darkness oppressive. Their calls for Raoul went unanswered, met only by haunting echoes. The lights retreated upwards, swallowed by the forest canopy, leaving behind only the soft crackle of the dying campfire. When they reached the shoreline, they found Raoul gasping and soaked, kneeling in the water. His face was pale, his eyes vacant and distant. Desperate, Miguel screamed for help, while old John yelled for a doctor. Within 20 minutes, they had carried him to their boat, beginning a frantic 40 kilometers journey upriver to the nearest town. By dawn, they arrived at a small riverside clinic. The doctor, initially skeptical, discovered Raoul severely disoriented. At times, he couldn't even recall his own name. Reddish, circular burn marks covered his hands and forearms, precise and unlike any common injury. Local authorities soon became involved, carefully documenting the fishermen's statements. Each account described the same inexplicable scene. Silent lights descending from the forest, Raoul's mysterious disappearance and return, with no memory of what had occurred. These were experienced river workers, men whose lives depended on routine and nature's predictability. But that night, everything changed. The remote riverbank, once felt safe and familiar, had been transformed in an instant. Despite Raoul's shock, the group insisted on continuing. They packed camp quickly, though sleep was impossible. The river felt colder and more unsettling. Animals seemed on edge. Mosquitoes swarmed, eels darted at the edges of their lamps' glow, and birds screeched overhead like warning sirens. Multiple witnesses agreed. 3 distinct, cold, silent, and glassy white light beams had emerged between the treetops, approaching their camp. But a routine fishing expedition near Alagamar turned into something far beyond ordinary when Raoul encountered inexplicable events one night by the river. The lights didn't cast shadows but flattened depth, making the fire's glow seem weak. Nobody knew exactly how high they hovered, yet they were bright enough to affect night vision. Suddenly, Raoul vanished, one moment bending over the water, the next completely submerged without a splash or disturbance. When he reappeared moments later, he was uneasy and confused. The lights pulsed once more before retreating into the forest, extinguishing as mysteriously as they had appeared. The fisherman felt an odd sensation of being simultaneously scanned, watched, and strangely protected. At the clinic, Raoul's condition was unsettling. He couldn't speak coherently for an hour. His family recognized him, but noted he seemed hollow with a distant look in his eyes. 2 circular burns, each about an inch wide, were painful. The doctor found no logical explanation. No campfire spark, insect bite, or chemical exposure could account for his condition. Raoul later claimed he remembered only darkness after the lights. "Then I was here," he said, his memory returning slowly and incompletely. He blinked as if seeing his own hands for the first time. Police recorded his testimony meticulously, noting the men's consistent fear. No monetary gain was sought. They were simply fishermen deeply connected to their land and water. In the weeks following the incident, Alagamar experienced a surge of strange occurrences. Bright river lights, vanishing fishing nets, mysterious water ripples, and humming vibrations near the shore became common reports. Some villagers felt like pulses against their skin during dawn walks near the forest's edge. By late 1991, a Brazilian UFO research group investigated. They documented multiple accounts of the original incident and smaller anomalies. Riverbank soil samples showed subtle discoloration and magnetic irregularities, though no radiation was detected. Photographic and medical records documented Raoul's dazed state and circular burns. Local press covered the story extensively, carefully translating the term abduction into Portuguese. While the case became a minor national curiosity, its remote location prevented sensationalist headlines. 2 critical documents substantiated the incident: official police records from Alagamar and the attending doctor's medical notes. Copies circulated among Brazilian UFO research groups, preserving the mysterious account. Brazil's remote Guarapi River basin offers a landscape rarely explored at night, dense with biodiversity and isolation. It was here that Raoul experienced an encounter that would become a significant, yet largely unknown case among Brazilian UFO researchers. Consistent reports described Raoul's experience with specific details: round burns on his arms and forearms, severe headaches, and short-term memory loss. Photographic evidence from 2 weeks after the incident exists in archived files, and research group logs confirm multiple sightings in the area throughout late 1991. The event follows a classic wilderness abduction pattern: an isolated location, a small group of credible witnesses, sudden disappearance and return, physical evidence, and partial memory loss. What makes this case unique is its local documentation and the witnesses' reluctance to seek publicity. Questions surrounding the incident remain unanswered. Whether reported nighttime lights, technological probes, or natural anomalies. Was Raoul deliberately targeted or accidentally involved? Could the region's natural characteristics, darkness, humidity, and forest canopy somehow attract or focus unusual phenomena? Decades later, Raoul has returned to his fishing life. His burns have healed, but his fragmented memory retains faint echoes of circular lights and sudden absence. For researchers studying such encounters, the Alagamar incident represents a compelling example of recurring patterns in remote wilderness events. The case leaves fundamental questions hanging. Why this location? Why this moment? And most intriguingly, why the persistent silence that followed? The ridge of Carberwyn slowly transformed with descending, shifting colours. Local nurse Pat Evans was among the first to witness the event, at home with her 2 daughters. They all saw the brilliant lights and believed an airliner might have crashed, thinking she could help potential survivors. Pat grabbed her medical bag and drove toward the mountain with her daughters. They weren't alone in their journey. Other villagers were already heading to the remote slopes, drawn by curiosity and concern. Some described a pulsing amber light sitting low on the ridge, while others reported intermittent blue and red flashes appearing and vanishing. When Pat reached the mountain road, she stopped her car, staring ahead in disbelief. A perfect circle of light sat silently on the hillside, stationary, pulsing, and undeniably unnatural. Across Denbasher, dozens of calls flooded the police about loud rumbles and flashing lights, with many assuming a plane crash. Local law enforcement quickly contacted the Royal Air Force and Ministry of Defence. Raff Valley on Anglesey confirmed no military or civilian aircraft were missing. The British Geological Survey later reported a minor 3.5 magnitude earthquake centred in the Berwyn Mountains. Yet, something felt off. Witnesses emphasized the ground shaking was accompanied by an aerial event, not caused by it. The skylights were visible before and after the rumble, lasting far longer than a typical earthquake or meteor strike. The official response was remarkably swift. Within hours, military vehicles had cordoned off key access roads. Helicopters were flying over the mountain range. By the next morning, the government's explanation emerged quickly. A small earthquake combined with a bright meteor, was responsible. They claimed the light was simply a bow light streaking across the sky and disintegrating behind the mountains. But many on the ground rejected this narrative. A meteor that glowed for over 10 minutes, appearing to land and then remain stationary on a ridge, defied explanation. Pat Evans stood firmly by her account when speaking to the media. "It wasn't a meteor," she insisted. "I know what I saw. Here's the rewritten version. Something crashed in the Berwyn Mountains, and it defied expectations. Instead of disintegrating like a typical meteor, the object remained stationary, resting on the ground." What followed was a cascade of speculation and hushed conversations. The event quickly drew attention from multiple sources. Journalists swarmed the small community, while military activity sparked intense curiosity. Strange men in suits began visiting residents, asking probing questions. Some locals were explicitly warned against discussing the incident publicly. Farmer Durand Edwards, living on the northern edge of the Berwyns, initially claimed to have witnessed a metallic object being airlifted by helicopter in the early hours of January 24th. Though he later retracted his statement out of fear of ridicule, his account resonated with similar stories circulating among villagers. Official channels offered little clarity. A 1979 Ministry of Defence inquiry asserted that no official investigation had been conducted and that military presence was routine following a potential crash report. However, skeptics found significant discrepancies between public statements and internal memos released under the UK's Freedom of Information Act. In the late 1990s, Tony Dodd, a former police officer turned UFO investigator, reignited interest in the case. After interviewing over a dozen locals and allegedly receiving testimony from anonymous military sources, more extraordinary narratives emerged. Some accounts suggested the recovery of a craft of unknown origin, with UK and possibly US personnel quickly swarming the area. More sensational claims hinted at the recovery of non-human bodies, drawing parallels to the Roswell incident. Yet these remain unverified, based primarily on unsubstantiated hearsay with no photographic or documentary evidence. Hard data was not entirely lacking. The British Geological Survey's seismic readings were genuine. Police logs and emergency call records confirmed multiple residents reporting strange lights, some flashing, some steady coinciding with the seismic event. Meteor experts questioned the bolide explanation, noting no such object was definitively logged by observatories that night. The scope of civilian reports extended beyond Landrillo. with similar accounts emerging from Langanog, Corwin, and surrounding areas. The mystery persisted, defying simple explanation. 9. The Berwyn Mountains. Something extraordinary happened on January 23, 1974, witnesses reported. Strange occurrences across the region, even as far as Wrexham. A craft had been seen descending silently. Local farmers noticed their livestock becoming unusually restless for days. Television sets flickered inexplicably, and dogs barked uncontrollably. These events quickly transformed the area into a hotspot for UFO researchers, who developed various theories ranging from alien spacecraft to secret military experiments. The incident drew numerous visitors to the region. Some hoped to uncover physical evidence, while others were simply driven by curiosity. Local authorities remained adamant that nothing significant had occurred, suggesting the event was merely a combination of an earthquake and a meteor. At Evans became a key figure in the ongoing narrative. She claimed that officials approached her in the aftermath, subtly discouraging her from speaking publicly. Other witnesses reported similar experiences. The event left behind more than just unanswered questions. It created a lasting legacy of silence. Independent researchers continued investigating, filing information requests, and revisiting old interviews. In 2002, journalist Nick Redfern published a comprehensive review, highlighting the unexplained military presence and inconsistent official statements. While the evidence never definitively proved an extraterrestrial encounter, it also failed to support the official explanation. The British government declassified some files in the 2000s, but many believe the most sensitive documents remain hidden. Today, the Berwyn Mountain crash remains one of Britain's most compelling UFO incidents. It shares characteristics with other mysterious encounters: a sudden seismic disturbance, strange lights, rapid military involvement, and swift attempts to close the case. 50 years later, the villagers of Landro still remember the night the earth shook. Whether it was a craft, a meteor, or something else entirely, the event continues to captivate imaginations. If a craft did crash, the wreckage is long gone. If the lights were a meteor, they were unlike any seen before. And if it was simply an earthquake, it arrived with an unprecedented display of light and secrecy. The night of June 18, 1990, in Vilvoorde, Belgium, started like any other patrol shift. Officers Roland and Mark received a call from a local farmer reporting strange lights in the fields. Most police units would have dismissed such reports, as Belgium had seen numerous UFO sightings since 1989. But this caller sounded different, shaken and insistent about the lights being low and unnatural. The officers drove out to investigate, their headlights cutting through the darkness and revealing only dewy grass and thick hedges. Silence hung heavy until Roland spotted something extraordinary. About 150 meters from the road, a black triangular craft hovered just above the ground. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. No noise, no exhaust, no blinking lights. Instead, 3 steady red-orange lights marked each corner, with a larger white light centered in the craft. As they watched, the object began to rotate slowly, its lights maintaining a precise geometric formation. Without warning, it moved westward, low, silent, and gradually accelerating. Roland radioed the Vilvoorde Central dispatcher, who instructed them to maintain visual contact. The officers pursued in their patrol car, trying to track its path along a parallel road, but the craft was too quick. They watched it lift higher, still maintaining its triangular shape, before shooting into the sky with impossible speed. No sound, no sonic boom, just a blur of acceleration that left the lights vanishing into the darkness. Stunned, the 2 officers sat in their car. No words were exchanged. When they returned to headquarters, they filed a professional written report detailing the shape, size, behavior, and flight characteristics of what they had witnessed. The sky continued to glow, and people would continue to glance toward the mountains, wondering what had truly come down that night. The Belgian UFO wave, spanning from late 1989 to 1991, was characterized by hundreds of reports, but few were as compelling as those from on-duty law enforcement officers. In one specific incident, 2 officers encountered an unusual object with remarkably consistent characteristics. Both officers described the object similarly: triangular in shape, silent, and hovering. Crucially, they made no attempt to theorize about what they had seen, simply reporting their observation as professionals trained to document events objectively. Their supervisor forwarded the report to John Darmy, who was collecting data as part of the national UFO investigation. The report then reached the Belgian Air Force, which began a thorough investigation. Radar logs from that night revealed something intriguing: an anomalous object matching the officers' reported time and location, moving at low altitude before vanishing within seconds. Critically, no flight plans had been filed, and no known aircraft were operating in that area. The incident gained credibility because trained law enforcement professionals had witnessed it. This was significant in a wave of sightings that had already produced hundreds of reports. Their characteristics matched dozens of other Belgian UFO reports from that period: a triangular shape, silent operation, and unusual hovering behavior. Some previous cases even included radar visual confirmations, leading to dramatic intercept attempts by Belgian F-16s. These jets were often outmaneuvered, losing lock as the unidentified objects climbed or dropped at impossible speeds. One notable event in March involved the military tracking multiple unknowns on radar and capturing parts of the chase on infrared imaging. Despite a detailed public press conference featuring radar prints and pilot statements, no definitive identification was ever made. In this specific case, investigators from SOBEPS, the Belgian Society for the Study of Space Phenomena, independently interviewed both officers. Their testimonies remained consistent, with no hypnosis or suggestive techniques used. The organization noted the officers had no history of hoaxing or attention-seeking and were considered professional and trustworthy. Other civilians had also captured photos and videos during the UFO wave, adding further layers to this mysterious period of Belgian aerospace anomalies. And across Belgium, a series of UFO sightings captivated both military and civilian attention. 2 officers from Vilvoorde reported an encounter with a mysterious black triangle, though no photographic or video evidence ever surfaced. Their accounts relied solely on written reports and personal testimonies. Skeptics later proposed that these sightings might have been misidentified aircraft, potentially stealth planes undergoing NATO or US military testing. However, Belgian Air Force officials firmly denied any such operations. They emphasized that no foreign aircraft had been authorized to fly in Belgian airspace without prior notification, especially not black triangle-shaped craft hovering over towns. The most perplexing aspect of these encounters was their extraordinary characteristics. The objects moved with an unnerving silence, no sonic footprint, no downdraft, just slow, deliberate movement, followed by sudden vertical acceleration. Their speed and silence challenged known propulsion technologies. A declassified internal military summary acknowledged that the objects defied conventional explanation while simultaneously stating they posed no apparent threat. The 2 Vilvoorde officers maintained remarkable professionalism, avoiding media attention and never capitalizing on their extraordinary experience. They simply continued their regular patrols and eventually retired with distinguished honors. Years afterward, when researchers privately contacted them, the officers remained consistently steadfast about what they had witnessed. The government inquiry quietly concluded by the mid-1990s without definitive answers. The wave of sightings gradually diminished, but the documentation remained. Belgium's approach to these events was notably transparent. Military and civilian authorities collaborated openly, holding joint press conferences and sharing radar data. Yet fundamental questions persist. Why did these craft frequently appear over Belgian skies during such a specific time frame? Were they experimental aircraft from a foreign power, or something operating beyond current human comprehension? The Vilvoorde sighting endures as one of the most well-documented, sober, and compelling events of the Belgian UFO wave. For now, the files remain open, the mystery unresolved.